Chapter 421, Thrashing a Dog. Though there was quite a gap between Ling Han and the Rain Emperor in terms of cultivation, Ling Han's status as an Earth-grade alchemist was enough to let the two of them stand on equal footing. Strictly speaking, an Earth-grade low-level alchemist even had slightly higher status than a flower blossom tier cultivator. The two of them conversed for a while. When he found out that Ling Han was going to collect the crimson-red chilling ice grass, the Rain Emperor indicated that he would like to go with Ling Han and give him a helping hand. Ling Han gladly accepted. After so many days, who knows how many people were already aiming for that spiritual herb. Though he believed that no one below spiritual infant tier could obtain it successfully, there might be cultivators in the flower blossom tier standing guard by the side. Who would seize it from him when they saw that he had succeeded? What was he going to do then? The secret of the Black Tower was already known to some people, and Ling Han did not want to allow it to spread even wider. Thankfully, whether it was Ronghuan Xian, Azura Demon Emperor, or Elder Nine Clouds, they all only thought that he had a spirit tool that could contain living things and did not know that it was the Black Tower, which was not as ordinary as merely being able to contain living creatures. It's now even more difficult to see through this little girl. The Rain Emperor turned to look at Hunyo. In the past, he could still somehow manage to sense that the little girl had the cultivation of the gushing spring tier, but now it was as if Hunyo had turned into mist and looked very hazy to his eyes. Hunyo giggled in response. Since Ling Han treated the Rain Emperor politely, she would give him face as well. Otherwise, who would bother? The three of them journeyed towards the location of the crimson-red chilling ice grass. It was located in the core area in the first place, so after only less than half a day, the three of them had arrived at their destination. However, they were not the only ones. 3 other people were already here. Yao Huiyu, Tong Ji-ming, as well as Xuan'er. These 3 obviously wanted to obtain the crimson-red chilling ice grass as well, yet were unable to do so. Though Xuan'er's face could not be seen, it had to be filled with anxiety. Sensing the approach of Ling Han and the others, Yao Huiyu's eyes swept over them and immediately lit up brilliantly, as if his gaze had transformed into uncountable sharp blades that shone with luster. An endless battle spirit gushed out from him. He stared fixatedly at the Rain Emperor. Wang, wang, wang. The long sword at his waist actually released humming sounds, as if it wanted to exit its sheath on its own. The Rain Emperor was the same. A mighty aura spread out from him with multiple flashes of divine light surging around him, which transformed into multiple solid fists. The two of them had already taken up fancy to each other in the great battle with the demonic ape, but afterwards, both had suffered heavy injuries and thus naturally went off to heal their wounds, as well as digest the battle comprehension they had obtained through this battle. This was the second time they had met, and both were at their best condition. As a result, battle spirit instantly soared in both of them. Young man, you still dare to appear. Have you forgotten what my lord has said? Tong Ji-ming smirked coldly at Ling Han in the past. Yao Huiyu had declared that the next time he saw Ling Han, he was definitely going to take his life. Ling Han glanced at him and said, "Whose dog is this that only knows how to bark crazily all day and night? If the owner's not going to take care of properly, I'm going to kill it." Yao Huiyu withdrew his attention from the Rain Emperor and said calmly to Ling Han, "If you have the ability, then you can kill if you like." Tong Ji-ming sneered. He was in the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier and his battle prowess was at least 12 stars, so how could a young man in the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean compare to that? Pooh! He was instantly astonished. The 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier? Not even 3 months had passed, but how had this guy leaped from the 5th layer of the spiritual ocean tier all the way to the 9th? This. Previously, he had praised Yao Huiyu for being in the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier at 17 years old, and this young man in front of him now was in no way inferior. Could it be that this would be the second coming of Yao Huiyu? However, so what if he was in the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier? There was still a gap of a complete tier between the both of them, and that was a gulf that no amount of talent would be able to compensate for. See how I shall suppress you, he shouted loudly. Since Yao Huiyu had allowed him to act, he would naturally not have any more reservations. Ling Han smiled calmly. He was able to deal even with Ding Yuan Xian, who had 15 battle stars, so what more Tong Ji Ming, who only had 12. Furthermore, he had already broken through to the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier now, so his battle prowess had naturally increased by another 1 or 2 battle stars. However, he did not have the time to tangle with him. Anyways, he wanted to collect the crimson red chilling ice grass, so he might as well just play his trump card directly. Small tower, he called out internally. Hong, small tower instantly moved the black tower to begin the installation of power. His aura began to spike madly. The middle period, the late period, the peak period of the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier, he only paused momentarily before passing over the threshold smoothly and into the spiritual pedestal tier. Then, it was the 1st layer, the 2nd, the 3rd, and soared crazily like this all the way, until his cultivation finally stalled at the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier. Pooh! 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 The Rain Emperor, Yao Huiyu, Zhu Xuan'er, and Tong Ji Ming all widened their eyes at the same time, completely incapable of believing what they saw happen with their very eyes. What kind of alchemical pill is this that would allow one's cultivation to increase by a whole major tier? The Rain Emperor and Zhu Xuan'er knew that Ling Han was an earth-grade alchemist, so it was not too strange for him to be capable of concocting an alchemical pill that could raise his cultivation level temporarily, but they had never heard of there being one that could grant one such a great increase. Meanwhile, Tong Ji Ming's mouth twitched. Though he had not battled with Ling Han before, merely based on Yao Huiyu's judgment about Ling Han, he knew that the latter definitely had terrifying battle prowess. And now that the both of them had equal cultivation levels, how was he supposed to continue? For the sake of your master, I shall spare your life. Ling Han waved his hand. A flash of sword chi appeared and shot forwards. Tong Ji Ming hurried to parry, but this flash of sword chi directly flung open his guarding arms. With a piu, it streamed past his neck, leaving behind a wound that instantly gushed out blood. His expression changed due to shock. This was obviously Ling Han being merciful. Otherwise, he was definitely capable of killing him in an instant. Of course, if Ling Han really made the move to kill him, Yao Huiyu would definitely not sit by and watch quietly and act to save him. Yao Huiyu looked contemplative. The current Ling Han was still much weaker than him, yet he still made his hands itch incomparably, wanting to challenge the former to a battle. However, whining against such a weakling was absolutely of no help to his formation of sword heart. Thus, he forcefully suppressed the urge. Ling Han did not give him a second glance and directly walked towards the crimson-red chilling ice grass from the fiery area. He had taken a petal of the golden flower of the stone, so need not fear the flames. Zhu Xuan'er's eyes lit up. Could it be that Ling Han was capable of collecting the crimson-red chilling ice grass? She instantly cast off her thoughts of stopping him. She was completely incapable of plucking this spiritual herb, but if it fell into Ling Han's possession, then there was at least some hope. Ling Han strode forwards. Wang, the thunder battle armor activated and multiple flashes of lightning appeared and repelled all the flames. He now had the ability of the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, which was enough to activate the defense ability of the thunder battle armor until the extent of the late period of the flower blossom tier. Yao Huiyu, that kind of monster, obviously was only in the 2nd layer of the flower blossom tier, but had at least 10 battle stars. However, battle prowess being 10 stars did not mean that defense was also 10 stars. The might of the flames would attack from all directions, so it was useless no matter how monstrous your battle prowess was unless he could destroy this whole place with a wave of his sword. Therefore, in this place, Yao Huiyu's resistance was at most comparable to a normal cultivator's in the 3rd or 4th layer of the flower blossom tier. The maximum was the 5th layer, it was definitely no higher than that. Ling Han quickly traveled half the distance, but as he continued to advance, his speed slowed down. Numerous holes appeared on the thunder battle armor, the flames entered through these holes and battered Ling Han's body. Instantly, a charred hole would appear. However, Ling Han did not even wrinkle his brow, and merely continued to walk forwards. Chapter 422, Obtaining the Spiritual Herb. In Ling Han's eyes, there was nothing more important than obtaining the crimson red chilling ice grass on this trip. In exchange for this spiritual herb, he could even sacrifice the heavenly luck stone and the primal chaos source rock. He was suffering under enormous agony, but looked as if he felt nothing. The body of rock cliff could cut off his sense of pain, and the indestructible heaven scroll was fully protecting the source of his life, and added with the protection offered by the thunder battle armor, this granted him the qualification to continue advancing. The Rain Emperor and Yao Huiyu both looked astonished. If they were merely talking in terms of defense, Ling Han was already superior to the both of them. However, in battle, defense was a passive ability because a powerful level of attack also belonged to defense, capable of forcing an opponent to the level that he could not fight back. So even if defense were slightly weaker, what could that impact? Their astonishment was due to that suit of battle armor that Ling Han was wearing. It was really too shocking. It was actually capable of raising the defense to the level of passive protection of a cultivator in the peak period of the flower blossom tier and protect Ling Han from all angles. However, for some unknown reason, they kept feeling that there was some flaw in this battle armor. That was because a hole had been pierced through the thunder battle armor, which was the reason for this faint feeling of strangeness. It was still fine for lower cultivation level, but the higher the cultivation level, the more magnified this flaw would be. After all, it was not a completely whole, flawless level 10 spirit tool. Zhu Xuan'er's eyes lit up in the meantime. She hoped very much that Ling Han could successfully collect the spiritual herb. As long as he succeeded, there would still be room for discussion. Ling Han did not bother with what the others were thinking. He simply strode forwards, intending to take as much advantage of this chance to collect the crimson red chilling ice grass as possible. Otherwise, he could only wait until after he broke through to the spiritual pedestal tier to once again make use of the installation of power from the Black Tower. But he still wanted to suppress his own cultivation level and return to completely perfect this cultivation level, and did not intend to break through so quickly. Thus, if he could make use of this installation of power to obtain the crimson red chilling ice grass, that was naturally best. Moreover, this kind of trial was also a chance for him. 4 meters, 3 meters, 2 meters, 1 meter. The spiritual herb was within reach, but Ling Han looked to be in great pain. The might of these flames was really too terrifying. Even if he had cut off his sense of pain, he was still unable to escape it completely, because he felt as if his divine sense was also burning, making him feel extremely horrible. He definitely had to be as fast as possible. Ling Han took another step forward and finally arrived next to the spiritual herb. However, he did not pluck the spiritual herb, but rather drew the demon birth sword, intending to dig out the spiritual herb. As long as he could store it into the Black Tower alive, then who cared what kind of environmental conditions it needed? It would be able to continue growing in the Black Tower and could grow even better, as one day inside would be equal to 3 years. This was a level 7 spiritual herb, so Ling Han naturally did not intend to use it only once. Jiang, the sword scraped against the white rock underneath, instantly creating innumerable sparks of fire, and left behind a light trace. However, the tip of the sword solidified into a flash of snow white. An icy cold feeling quickly spread out from the blade of the sword, which made Ling Han shiver and feel as if all the blood in his body was about to freeze. He planned to slice this piece of rock in the middle and store it into the Black Tower as well. The tip of the sword thus naturally stabbed into the icy ground, which caused the attack of an icy air. And what was even stranger was that though the other half of the sword's blade was in the fiery ground, it did not cancel out the cold air, but rather cooperated with it extremely well. After a surge of cold air, then came a surge of burning heat, making Ling Han's blood that had been frozen just moments ago boil again in an instant. It was such agony that he immediately spat out blood. Fuck, this was the genuine feeling of experiencing ice and fire at the same time. Ling Han gritted his teeth, but had no intention to stop at all. Ding, 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 he used the demon birth sword like it was a chopper and continuously sliced away at the rock. Thankfully, it was a level 10 spirit tool. If the grade was slightly lower and it was used to slice away at this kind of place where ice and fire wove together, the durability of the weapon would definitely be decreased. Within a few moments, it'd probably be shattered. However, even so, because Ling Han's ability was at solid disadvantage, he did not slice very quickly. Meanwhile, his left arm, left leg, and right leg were beginning to be charred, and the fragrance of barbecued meat gradually wafted out. His right arm was still fine because he focused the indestructible heaven scroll to heal it and gave up on the other, unimportant parts. Hunyo was very anxious and jumped around in panic. However, she was still filled with wariness for this ice and fire area, and did not dare to rush in thoughtlessly. Moreover, Ling Han was still standing and waving his sword, so things had not advanced to the worst extent. If Ling Han fell down, she would definitely scramble over and try her best to drag Ling Han out. When his two legs were about to be burned off, Ling Han used the indestructible true fluid without hesitation. He had a total of 3 drops, which would allow him to recover completely for 3 times. Wang, a majestic essence of life flowed within his body. Instantly, all his injuries were healed. Ding, 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 Ling Han was chopping more energetically. But when the essence of the indestructible true fluid was completely expended, his arm and legs began to once again show signs of being charred. Meanwhile, Yao Huiyu and the others were watching dumbfounded. He was actually able to recover instantly from such serious injuries. How terrifying was that kind of divine pill that possessed such recovery abilities? If they managed to get one, then wouldn't that mean that they would be granted an extra life? Yao Huiyu was not yet aware of Ling Han's identity, but Zhu Xuan'er and the Rain Emperor both nodded internally. He was really worthy of being an Earth-grade alchemist. He was awesome. If this was known to Lu Jitong and the other Earth-grade alchemists, they would definitely break out into tears. How could there possibly be such an awesome Earth-grade alchemical pill in this world? Only the legendary sacred medicine, the 9 Immortals pill, possessed such effects, but that was a heaven-grade mid-level alchemical pill, and there was no longer anyone who could concoct it in this world. Ling Han sliced and sliced. Ding, 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 the sounds of impact did not stop, which made Yao Huiyu and the others all confused. Why did he not simply pull out the spiritual herb and leave, but chop the rock so determinately instead? Could it be that he actually wanted to get a live one and take it back so that he could continue to grow it? Did he actually have a suitable environment for it? They had really guessed correctly. However, there was absolutely no way that they would actually guess that there existed a priceless treasure like the Black Tower. Ling Han quickly used the second drop of indestructible true fluid. However, this time, it was obvious that his recovery speed had slowed down, and the medicinal effects had also disappeared faster. Even such a godly item would make one slowly immune to it. True, a drop of indestructible true fluid was practically capable of reviving a dead person, and furthermore, healed his injuries completely. If there was not any kind of limits to it, then it would really be illogical. When the effects of the second drop of indestructible true fluid completely vanished, Ling Han had already chopped off 2/3 of the white rock. He could not help but sigh. If he could grasp Sword Ray at this time and used 10,000 techniques returned to one, at the same time, perhaps one strike would be enough to completely chop this piece of rock in 2. There was no other way at this point, so he could only keep circulating the 4 seasons sword technique. If he used the mysterious 3,000, then Yao Huiyu would definitely be able to tell. At that time, then it was even possible that the old monsters of the Heaven's Sword sect would move out and interrogate him forcefully to find out where he had learnt this sword technique from. By then, even if he could invent some kind of reason, how could the Heaven's Sword sect spare an outsider that had learned a sword technique of their sect? Thus, before he had adequate power, Ling Han did not want to let the Heaven's Sword sect know that he had learnt the 3 styles of black origin. I chop. Chop, 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 chop. Only after a while was Ling Han forced to use the last drop of indestructible true fluid, and by this time, the white rock was close to being chopped off completely. Ling Han seemed to have gone mad. There was no longer any indestructible true fluid to extend his life for him, so he had to chop the white rock completely before he collapsed. Chapter 423, Battling Yao Huiyu. Charred skin once again appeared on Ling Han's arms and legs, but there was only a tiny sliver of the white rock left. He gave a loud yell and made a vast slash with his sword. Peng, the rock finally broke. He stretched out a hand and pressed down on it, whilst communicating with the Black Tower. Xiao, he had stored both the broken rock along with the scarlet rainbow frost ice grass inside the Black Tower. Retreat. He hurriedly retreated, and in a few steps, exited the zone of flames. He quickly drew out multiple alchemical pills which he swallowed down like crazy. In the meantime, he continuously circulated the indestructible heaven scroll to heal his injuries. "You're already cooked," Hunyo said with a hint of heartache in her voice as she raced over, but when she gave a few sniffs with her little nose, her saliva dripped out of her mouth. "Smells nice." The corner of Ling Han's mouth twitched. Was this little girl going to pounce on him and take a bite? "Grandmaster Ling, please give the crimson red chilling ice grass to me. No matter how many origin crystals, I will pay you for it." Zhu Xuan'er immediately exclaimed. "Grandmaster Ling?" Yao Huiyu wore a thoughtful smile. "He's an alchemist." "Earth-grade low-level alchemist," the Rain Emperor answered. This time, Yao Huiyu finally looked surprised. He had estimated that Ling Han was at most a black-grade mid-level alchemist, or high-level at best, but he had never imagined that Ling Han was actually an earth-grade alchemist. Don't think lesser of an earth-grade low-level alchemist. Once one passed to earth-grade, it was like a cultivator had passed into the flower blossom tier. It was a completely different plane. A young man who had yet to reach 18 years old was actually an earth-grade low-level alchemist. Yao Huiyu's talent in martial arts was indeed worthy of receiving a thumbs up from mostly everyone in this world, but if his talent was compared to Ling Han's accomplishments in alchemy, Ling Han was in no way inferior, or might have even exceeded him drastically. That was because when he was at Ling Han's age, he was only in the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier. That was only comparable to being a black-grade mid-level alchemist. But what about Ling Han? In martial arts, he had reached the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier as well. He was a really terrifying young man. No wonder his heart would throb with the feeling that Ling Han would be one of his greatest rivals in the future. Yet Ling Han did not pay them any attention. He merely continued to circulate the indestructible heaven scroll. The effects of the alchemical pills were also continuously taking effect, allowing his body to recover at a rapid rate. As long as he was not constantly being attacked by the flames, the indestructible heaven scroll could display its effects to the fullest. After about 10+ minutes, he stood back up. Though his injuries had not recovered completely, most of his injuries had. "Ling Han, hand over the crimson red chilling ice grass to Xuan'er and I can spare your life," Yao Huiyu said calmly. He had said before that the next time he saw Ling Han, he would take the latter's life. The Rain Emperor immediately humphed and interrupted, "I was just thinking to have a battle with you." He decisively accepted the challenge to battle in Ling Han's stead. Yet Ling Han smiled and said, "Rain Emperor, just leave this battle to me." There was still half an hour left of the installation of power from the Black Tower, so how could it be wasted? Ha 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 ha. Yao Huiyu laughed loudly, but as he laughed, he kept shaking his head. "Though I have a high opinion of your potential, the current you is not acceptable. You are not yet qualified to battle me. You'd only find out after a battle." Ling Han waved the demon birth sword. Faint patterns appeared, and a terrifying pressure emanated from the sword. This kind of pressure had strong suppressive effects on any cultivator below the flower blossom tier, but its effects were limited against those upwards. After all, from that cultivation tier onwards, the cultivator had stepped beyond the limits of mortality. Yao Huiyu humphed and said, "I was originally very expectant of the day that you will come to challenge me in the future, but if you insist to seek your own death, I do not mind granting your wish either." He was someone who had no fear of killing in the first place. He did not have the habit of treasuring talent either. It was only a spur-of-the-moment kind of thing for him to make a 2-year promise with Ling Han, so naturally, he did not mind killing Ling Han before then. Mr. Yao, Grandmaster Ling is an Earth-grade alchemist. Xuan'er reminded coldly. Though she very much wanted the crimson-red chilling ice grass, she had no intention to take Ling Han's life for it. Moreover, the two of them were still supposed to head to the Middle State to battle together, and were allies. How could she possibly sit by and watch? Yao Huiyu smirked. Others might fear the alchemist society, but how could he? The internal workings of age-old sects like the Heaven's Sword sect were far stronger than anyone dared to imagine. Even the alchemist society would not be willing to trifle with them easily. So what if he killed Ling Han? Could it be that the alchemist society would dare to come to Heaven's Sword sect to apprehend him? If you can block 3 sword strikes from me, I will spare you, he said darkly. Don't think that his heart had softened. It was an absolutely one-sided domination for one in the flower blossom tier against an opponent in the spiritual pedestal tier. Wouldn't 3 moves be enough to kill? Ling Han raised the demon birth sword levelly and answered calmly, "You won't be able to kill me." These were honest words. Currently, he was, at any rate, in the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, and at least before the installation of power from the Black Tower ended, he would be able to activate the peak period of the Flower Blossom tier level defense from the Thunder Battle Armor. As for when the installation of power from the Black Tower ended? Naturally, he would then beckon over the Rain Emperor to take his place. He was definitely not a man who was willing to die for useless pride. First strike. Yao Huiyu acted. He casually waved his finger, merely forming 5 flashes of sword chi. But who was he? Not only was he in the Flower Blossom tier, he had also proclaimed himself as the 2nd strongest swordsman in the world. Though that was a bit of an exaggeration, his power in the Flower Blossom tier was still unbelievably strong. It was as if these 5 flashes of sword chi were furious dragons that could easily kill a cultivator in the 9th layer of the spiritual tier over 100 times. In the first place, the gap between the spiritual pedestal and the Flower Blossom tier was like the gap between heaven and earth, what more when it was the kind of monster that Yao Huiyu was. Ling Han was unafraid and waved his sword to parry. Pu, 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 pu. He could not slice apart Yao Huiyu's sword chi, but the Thunder Battle Armor managed to easily block all 5 flashes. Ling Han wasn't even forced back from the impact. Interesting. Yao Huiyu smiled. Previously, he had already seen the defensive ability that the Thunder Battle Armor displayed against flames, but being able to resist flames and being able to defend against a powerful attack were 2 completely different things. For example, an earthen wall could resist fire, but facing a powerful attack, it would definitely be broken. After this one strike, Yao Huiyu's thought that it was a fluke had disappeared. The Thunder Battle Armor could not only defend against fire and ice attacks, but was also effective against powerful attacks. He had to get serious. Yao Huiyu drew his sword, his expression serious. For someone as proud as he, since he had declared that he would strike 3 times, he was definitely not going to strike a 4th time. Otherwise, that would ruin the core of his art of the sword, and he could never possibly form sword heart in this lifetime. He once again waved his hand. Xiao, 9 flashes of sword chi appeared simultaneously, and charged towards Ling Han. Pung! These flashes of sword chi were once again perfectly dispersed by the Thunder Battle Armor. How could normal attacks be effective against defense at the level of the peak period of the Flower Blossom tier? Yao Huiyu's expression increased in seriousness. He did not mean to take Ling Han seriously at all, but the might of the latter's battle armor had exceeded his expectations. He had to use his best move, or he would really be unable to kill this young opponent. He took in a deep breath and his treasured sword trembled slightly. Endless sword chi was exuded from all over his body, as if the wielder had also transformed into a sword. His body was the sword, his consciousness was the sword, all was the sword. Ling Han was greatly moved. In his last life, he had naturally not seen the Sword Emperor attack at full strength, and Yao Huiyu's trying his best now instantly gave him inspiration. So the path of the sword could be walked in this way too. He wanted to walk the path of the strongest, so naturally, he had to absorb the strongest points of various paths. Mysterious 3000, slashing all three realms. Yao Huiyu struck. Xiao, xiao, xiao. A total of 1,200 flashes of light actually shone with luster from the strike. Ling Han smiled. It was indeed the mysterious 3000, he had made the right bet. Chapter 424, A Narrow Victory. 1,200 sword flashes. This meant that Yao Huiyu had shot out 11 flashes of sword chi. That was how the total number of sword flashes reached the high point of 1,200. This was an extremely terrifying attack. A cultivator in the flower blossom tier was capable of shooting out 1,200 sword flashes, and every flash was equivalent to Yao Huiyu's full power attack. If these sword flashes crashed onto the thunder battle armor, they were perfectly capable of crushing its flower blossom tier level defense. They were too concentrated and too powerful. Ling Han was also slightly surprised. He had foreseen that when the first two strikes of Yao Huiyu produced no effect, he would definitely use the mysterious 3000 in the third strike. The latter's pride and self-esteem would not allow the words he had declared to fall empty. However, he had never thought that Yao Huiyu had indeed hidden his real ability. He had actually formed as many as 11 flashes of sword chi. He was indeed a very ambitious man. He had already formed 11 flashes of sword chi, yet did not choose to consolidate them into sword ray. Was he planning to form 29 flashes then? The Rain Emperor was also greatly stirred. He had formed fist ray only after he had formed 10 flashes of chi, but he had never thought that 10 flashes was not the limit at all. There was nothing to be done about that. Due to the limits of the power structure, there was no way that the Rain Emperor's understanding and knowledge about martial arts could compare with a disciple of Heaven's Sword sect. This had nothing to do with personal talent, but was rather due to the gap between their respective legacies. Ling Han moved and used the shadow wind motion, and actually managed to weave around the 1,200 sword flashes. Extremely coincidentally and very amazingly, he avoided one sword flash after another, heading towards Yao Huiyu in attack. That was too inconceivable. The Rain Emperor and Zhu Xuan'er could not help but gape. That was definitely Yao Huiyu's strongest attack. If it was them, even if Zhu Xuan'er broke through to the flower blossom tier, she would only be able to stay on the defense against such an attack. Otherwise, she could only choose to retreat early on to avoid facing such power directly. But soon after, they immediately shook their heads internally. That was 1,200 sword flashes. It was absolutely impossible to defend against. Unless they possessed an overwhelming advantage in cultivation level, that would be the only way they could parry what was equivalent to the fierce attack of 1,200 Tao Huiyu. The only option was to retreat and dodge. This was the conclusion that the two of them had reached, yet Ling Han did the exact opposite. He actually went straight up against the 1,200 sword flashes and charged towards Yao Huiyu to attack. But it seemed as if he could really succeed. He had already managed to dodge over 700 sword flashes. How could this scene not strike the Rain Emperor and Zhu Xuan'er dumb? Meanwhile, Tong Ji-ming was gritting his teeth as well, yet he felt as if the pain caused by the injury on his neck had increased slightly. Only Hu Niu kept clapping her hands, calling out in praise. 800, 900, 1,000, 1,100, 1,200. Ling Han actually managed to pass all 1,200 sword flashes and arrived in front of Yao Huiyu. His sword streaked past, and he used the 4 seasons sword technique, spring, summer, autumn and winter cycled. Pung! Yao Huiyu was struck and his figure was instantly flung backwards from the impact. However, multiple patterns lit up on his body, and when he touched the ground, there was only a very shallow wound on the left side of his face. Blood was seeping out, but it was as if it was mercury. It dripped slowly and exuded a silvery white light. Ling Han withdrew his sword. He managed to turn tables around in the final attack because he, too, had cultivated the mysterious 3,000. Moreover, he had formed 9 flashes of sword chi himself, which was only 2 flashes of sword chi less than his opponent. As a result, he naturally knew how these sword flashes circulated. Though the additional 200 flashes did give him some trouble. However, he did have the divine sense of the heaven tier after all, and his opponent was only in the flower blossom tier, so the additional 200 sword flashes were not too much of a problem. This was what led to a Miraclia cultivator of the 9th layer of spiritual pedestal tier overcame the strongest killing move of his flower blossom tier opponent and managed to land his own attack. Even if he had only left behind a very tiny wound on Yao Huiyu's face, which was completely superficial. A hush fell all around them. The Rain Emperor was astonished, Zhu Xuan'er's beautiful eyes shone brightly, whereas Tong Ji-ming trembled. Only Hu Niu was clapping her hands wildly and broke the silence with her applause. Yao Huiyu's expression changed repeatedly, but finally returned to impassiveness. He exuded an absolutely relaxed air and even smiled. He said, "Not bad, not bad. In my whole life, this is the first time that I have been wounded by someone who is 10 years younger than me. I've said before that I would only strike 3 times. Ling Han, there are still 20 months. Within these 20 months, even if I meet you once again, I will pretend that I have not seen you. However, 20 months later, no matter where you're hiding, I will find you and kill you. I will step on your corpse and break through to the 2nd level of my path of the sword." He had completely recovered his forceful manner and brimmed with confidence. He turned to Zhu Xuan'er and said, "Xuan'er, I'm sorry. I was not able to help you collect the spiritual herb, but please don't worry. I will immediately return to the middle state and definitely help you get spiritual herb." After saying so, he nodded at Tong Ji-ming, and the two of them turned around and left. Ling Han's eyes stayed on Yao Huiyu's figure. The next time they met, he would definitely not take advantage of the fact that he had an understanding of mysterious 3,000, instead, he would use real battle prowess to defeat this second coming of the Sword Emperor. "Sword Emperor, it would be good if you had managed to enter the Reel of Gods. I shall definitely seek you out in the future for a good battle." Ling Han's confidence soared. He was certain that he would be able to break through to the flower blossom tier in 2 years' time. "Grandmaster Ling, how much crimson red chilling ice grass do you need to use to concoct your alchemical pill? Please leave some for Xuan'er." Zhu Xuan'er bowed to Ling Han. Whether it was because of his identity as an earth-grade alchemist or because of the battle prowess he currently possessed, she dared not use forceful means. Furthermore, she was most impressed by a genius of martial arts. Ling Han, with his cultivation of the 9th layer of spiritual ocean tier, though he had temporarily raised his cultivation to the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, was capable of wounding an elite cultivator of the flower blossom tier, especially when it was the kind of monster that Yao Huiyu was. It naturally filled her with an endless respect for him. Her beautiful eyes blazed, extremely enchanting. Meanwhile, the Rain Emperor smiled slightly and said, "Ling Han, I will still stay for some time in this dark devil forest, and when I reach the 9th layer of flower blossom tier, I will enter the other regions to travel. Therefore, if you encounter any trouble during this time, you can come here and look for me." "Many thanks, Rain Emperor." Ling Han raised his clasped hands in thanks. There was a protective screen that separated all 4 great regions and the middle state. A weaker person could freely pass through, but the higher one's cultivation, the harder it would be to pass through this barrier. For example, it was possible for a cultivator in the spiritual infant tier to pass through, but their cultivation would be greatly decreased. Thus, if one wanted to travel to the various regions and the middle state, the flower blossom tier was the best cultivation level for it. One would still be strong enough to ensure his own safety, yet would not be weakened in the process of passing through the barrier. The Rain Emperor looked over Ling Han and Zhu Xuan'er a few times, laughed loudly, and leaped through the air and left. Zhu Xuan'er's face reddened from the way he was looking at them. Thankfully, she had a white veil to cover her face, so no one could see how she currently resembled a peach. "Grandmaster Ling," she said to Ling Han shyly, her beautiful eyes clear and like honey, enough to make one's heart drunk with the sweetness. Ling Han thought for a moment, then said, 1 month later, bring enough origin crystals or other ingredients. Formation techniques would be all right as well. I can sell the crimson red chilling ice grass to you. If it was 1 month, there should be quite a few stalks of crimson red chilling ice grass in the Black Tower, so it would be fine to sell off 1 stalk. Really? Xuan'er asked, extremely excited. Ling Han revealed an impatient expression and countered, I am an earth-grade alchemist. Do you think I would lie to a little girl like you? Instantly, the corner of Xuan'er's mouth twitched, and she almost charged up to him to stab him with her sword. Chapter 425, Return to Extreme Yang City. Xuan'er, ranked 13th in the prodigy roll of the North region. In the ranking tournament that would come about a month later, it was a sure thing for her to be ranked among the top 3. It was not an impossible thing for her to be ranked first even. Furthermore, she was the greatest beauty of the North region. Without even showing her whole face, she was capable of making the excellent disciples of Heaven's Sword sect be at her beck and call, trying their best to gain her favor. How enchanting was she to be able to do that? Yet someone actually ignored her charms and actually rebuked her as a little girl. Xuan'er was really very displeased. If Ling Han was an old man in his 50s or 60s, she would have nothing to say. But it was obvious that this guy was 3 or 4 years younger than herself, yet acted all aged and experienced. How could she not explode with anger? Most importantly, Ling Han's expression seemed to be so natural. He did not look at all like he was playing a cat and mouse game with her. This was practically like stabbing a few dozen times directly into Xuan'er's heart that had always been so confident. At this moment, she really felt a strong impulse to pull off her veil. She was sure that once Ling Han saw her magnificent beauty, he, too, would fall captive to her charms. However, firstly, she had never wanted to make use of her beauty, and secondly, she was more fearful that Ling Han would fall for her and use the crimson red chilling ice grass, or his status as an earth-grade alchemist, to force her to his will. Thus, she gritted her teeth and suppressed this kind of impulsive urge. Grandmaster Ling, you look to be only 17 or 18 years old. If Xuan'er is a little girl, then what are you? She countered. Silly girl, whether one is mature or not is decided by one's mental age, not by the way one looks. I know already just by listening to you that you're really a silly girl. Ling Han shrugged, turned and left. Meanwhile, Hunyao made a face at Xuan'er, then caught up to Ling Han. Tugging on the corner of Ling Han's shirt, she giggled in laughter. Damn! 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 Xuan'er felt like she was about to go crazy. How could there be such a man that would drive one to such anger? He was really too irritating, wasn't he? He really made one want to throw something at him, right? Ling Han was very satisfied. This trip to the Dark Devil Forest was practically perfect. Not only did he reap massive benefits from this journey, he had also managed to conjure a demon emperor and solve a huge problem. He had also met the Rain Emperor again. This dominating emperor had already set out on his path of a ruler, and his future achievements were boundless. He brought Hunyao with him back to Extreme Yang City. If Yinlan already managed to obtain the 9-leaf black Ganoderma for him, he would be able to concoct the Restore Spirit Pill. Xuan'er actually caught up with them and traveled alongside Ling Han. This made Hunyao very displeased. She felt that this woman that liked to move her behind as she walked was really too annoying. Why did she keep trying to seduce her Ling Han? Ling Han had already transplanted the crimson red chilling ice grass. Actually, this stalk of spiritual herb had yet to reach full maturity, but after growing in the Black Tower for over a dozen days, it should be mature enough. Thus, when Ling Han returned to Extreme Yang City, this stalk of spiritual herb was fully grown, but bore only 3 pieces of fruit. Yet the main stem very rapidly wilted, as if it had transferred all its life into these 3 pieces of fruit. The fruit could not be used. The value of the crimson red chilling ice grass lay in its stem. However, these 3 pieces of fruit meant that over a month later, Ling Han would be able to gain 3 stalks of 100-year-old crimson red chilling ice grass. At that time, he would use one and sell another to Xuan'er. He would leave the last to continue bearing fruit, and in the future, he would no longer be short of this spiritual herb. He returned to the inn, yet found out that Lu Yutong and the others had long moved out. However, they had left Bang an address for Ling Han with a waiter. Naturally, it was because Lu Yutong and Li Si-chan had decided, and finally found a new home for them. When they reached Extreme Yang City, Zhu Xuan'er floated away, whereas Lin Han went to his new home. It was located in the eastern part of the city. From the outside, it looked very ordinary, but there was actually a sizable lake inside. Willow trees hung over the lake, making for a very pleasant scenery. Furthermore, there were platforms and towers, water pavilions and stone bridges, making one feel as if one had found a spot of calm in chaos. They had actually even hired guards at the doorway. They halted Ling Han's advance. This made Hunyo display her ferocious true nature and she almost bit them. Thankfully, Zhu Wujiao just happened to come out and hurriedly welcomed Ling Han into the residence. He also informed the guards that this was the real owner of the Ling residence. They had also hired some servants to work in the manor. After all, the manor was extremely large, and Lu Yutong and the others had other matters they needed to do, primarily cultivation and pill concoction, so how would they have time to do trivial tasks? Soon, Lu Yutong and the others came out to receive him. Ling Han roughly grasped the current state of events. Whether it was Forget Not or Alchemist King Pavilion, due to Lu Jitong's care, naturally no one dared to make any designs on them. However, because Ling Han had left for too long, the ingredients at Forget Not were almost finished. From last month onwards, they had even used the method of selling those dishes that needed these ingredients and limited the amount. Otherwise, they would have had no more ingredients to sell by now. It was the same for the Alchemist King Pavilion. The higher-grade alchemical pills that Ling Han had concocted were practically sold out, and although Li Si-chan had considerable talent in alchemy, she was still a very far way off from the alchemy emperor. Thankfully, Ling Han finally returned. Naturally, business matters had to be dealt with as soon as possible. Lin Han withdrew a large amount of fresh fruits and vegetables as well as some livestock from the Black Tower and told Zhu Wujiao to deliver them to Forget Not. As for alchemical pills, when he had the time, he would enter into the Black Tower to concoct them. After all, they needed time to be concocted, and could not just be withdrawn like those food ingredients. When it was time for lunch, Gong Letian came without an invitation. He was already addicted to the good stuff sold in Forget Not, yet after they limited the supply of dishes, he could only eat one excellent dish with each meal. How could his mouth, which had grown picky, tolerate this? Thus, he would come every day to join them for a meal because Lu Yutong and the others had long become picky as well and had to have dishes made with the food ingredients from the Black Tower for every meal. When he saw that Ling Han had returned, this guy immediately pounced on him and wailed, "Brother, you have finally come back. I'm almost about to die from waiting for your meat." Ling Han could not help but wear a dark expression. Did this guy know how to talk? He wanted to eat his flesh? Ling Han had returned today, so everyone naturally needed not continue conserving their supplies. Multiple kinds of gourmet dishes were served, they fiercely ate their meal, causing all of their stomachs to become rounded from the feast. After Gong Letian left, Ling Han gathered all of them around him. "This is the heavenly luck stone," Ling Han said, and explained the effects as well. This made everyone astonished. If they refined this small rock, then when they broke through to the next tier in future, they would gain an additional 4 or 5 battle stars worth of battle prowess? That was really too shocking. How could such a priceless treasure exist in this world? They were people of Rain Country, and due to their limited knowledge, they naturally could not have heard of such a treasure. Everyone was extremely excited. Even elite cultivators of the flower blossom and spiritual infant tier would fight over such a treasure so that they could help their own juniors raise their ability, but Ling Han actually managed to get as many as 9 pieces of such a rock. It was really astonishing. They were filled with gratitude and each swallowed a piece of heavenly luck stone. Once they broke through to the next major tier, their battle prowess would spike up a long way. This would be proven earliest through Lu Yutong and Zhu Wujiao, because they were both already on the 9th layer of the gushing spring tier. They had already strengthened their cultivation foundations close to perfection and were ready to break through. Qin would be much slower. He had just broken through to the 2nd layer of the spiritual ocean tier and still had a very long way to go until the spiritual pedestal tier. Guang Yuan was worse off. Because he was cultivating anew, he was indeed advancing at a faster rate than Qin Yi. However, because his cultivation had regressed, even if he once again broke through to the spiritual pedestal tier, he would still only be recovering his original ability and not breaking through. As a result, the benefits offered by the heavenly luck stone would only be visible when he broke through to the flower blossom tier. On the other side, Li Si-chan was unwilling to swallow the heavenly luck stone no matter what. To her, this was an extreme waste. She only needed the advancement of her cultivation level, and it would be enough for her to be able to concoct alchemical pills. For her, very powerful battle prowess was really not of much use. Chapter 426, Tiandu Thunderstar Array. Ling Han did not coerce her either. Having Li Si-chan refine the heavenly luck stone was indeed a bit of a waste. Since she did not need it, then they'd just put it aside for now. Anyways, no matter when, this kind of priceless treasure would be able to fetch an astronomical price. He headed to the Spirit Treasures Pavilion and asked if there was any news about the 9-leaf black Ganoderma. The result of his queries brought him much unexpected joy. Yin Hong had already gotten some news about the 9-leaf black Ganoderma, and would be able to obtain it in another 1 or 2 months' time. There was nothing to be done about that. A level 7 spiritual herb was extremely valuable, and Yin Hong was only the beloved daughter of the pavilion master of the North Region branch of the Spirit Treasures Pavilion, so she had limited means at her disposal. Most importantly, being the pavilion master of a branch of the Spirit Treasures Pavilion did not mean one had absolute authority. After all, the Spirit Treasures Pavilion was a very, very large party. It was just another 1 or 2 months' wait. Ling Han was still willing to wait. Moreover, about a month later, the prodigy role of the North Region would once again open up, and though Ling Han was not interested to participate, he might as well see how strong the prodigies of this era were. Right, do you still have any other array techniques? I can take out some cultivation or martial arts techniques to exchange for them, Ling Han said. Yin Hong rolled her eyes and replied, don't talk to me in the tone that you use to speak with kids. Just take a look at the goods. Ling Han waved his right hand, and instantly, 10 books with martial arts techniques appeared on the table, every one of them earth grade. Yin Hong flipped through them and could not help but look shocked. She asked, where did you steal so many martial arts techniques from? Don't you worry about that. Are you willing to trade? Ling Han said, smiling. Yin Hong could not help but be moved, but said, didn't I give you a little Tianyuan spirit snake array previously? I already learnt that, Ling Han said very casually. Pooh. Yin Hong instantly spat out a mouthful of tea. Already learnt? What kind of joke was he playing here? That was a level 4 array technique, and you already learnt it in a few months' time? One had to understand that array techniques could not be learned overnight. One had to first learn level 1 array patterns, followed by level 2, level 3, then level 4. Ordinarily, 1 or 2 months would be enough to learn level 1 array patterns, but level 2 would at least need 1 or 2 years, level 3 would require 4 to 5 years, and level 4 would at least need over 10 years to be learnt successfully. It would be easy in the beginning, but the further one advanced, the slower the rate of improvement. Thus, array techniques were only support techniques, and no one would actually only cultivate array techniques. Yin Hong could also be considered a genius of array techniques, yet even she had spent 3 whole months to fully grasp the little Tianyuan spirit snake array, and this was still based on the fact that she had already grasped a large amount of level 4 array patterns. You're bluffing. She did not believe him. Ling Han smiled slightly and spread out his right hand. 7 golden patterned rods appeared, and the little Tianyuan spirit snake array appeared in his consciousness. Instantly, the power of nature gushed forth, and a white snake suddenly appeared. What? Yin Hong stood up abruptly, her beautiful eyes wide. You are practically a monster. Hey, even if we know each other well, I will still get angry if you insult me like that, Ling Han said, smiling. Yin Hong still looked dumbfounded and said, I thought that I was a genius of array techniques, but when compared with you, I feel like I'm an idiot. True, I am a genius. Ling Han nodded. Yin Hong could not help but sigh. Can't you be a little modest? This is the truth. If I act modest, that would be being pretentious. Acting pretentious is something that only bastards would do, Ling Han said in mock seriousness. Yin Hong instantly broke out in laughter, and as she laughed, her beautiful body shook with her peals of laughter, without worrying if she would ignite Ling Han with her voluptuous movements or that he would be overcome by lust and push her down. After a while, she said seriously, with your level in array techniques, perhaps you may be even more impressive than I am a year later, and can take my place as the main force in the array techniques competition. Then you'd have to increase my pay. Ling Han said seriously. Yin Hong rolled her lovely eyes at him and said, just a few words of praise and you're over the moon already? However, be it for array technique, alchemy, or martial arts, every region can send 3 people, and the one who has achieved the best result will be used in the judgment. The higher your achievements in array techniques, the higher the possibility of us getting higher marks in array techniques. All right, I'll trade with you. She drew out an ancient book and placed it in front of Ling Han. Tiandu Thunder Star Array. Ling Han cast a glance over it. These words were written on the book's cover. A level 5 array technique. Yin Hong declared, her expression somber. However, this is the highest level of array technique that I can obtain. In the case of level 6 array techniques, I am not yet qualified to learn. But even if I have, I could not possibly teach you either. There are very strict rules about that. Yet Ling Han was pleased. The might of a level 5 array technique was equivalent to the spiritual pedestal tier, and he was only a hair's breadth away from breaking through to the spiritual pedestal tier. Level 4 array techniques, on the other hand, were not of much help, as very soon, they would not be useful to him anymore. Deal. He grabbed the book of array techniques and left. Yin Hong could not help but grit her teeth. She was, in any case, a great beauty, and was naturally charming in disposition. Was this brat blind? The reason why Ling Han was able to advance so fast on the path of array techniques naturally was related to the fact that he had a sliver of the divine sense left behind from the heaven tier. Furthermore, he had entered into various ancient historical sites in his last life, so had studied much about array techniques. Thus, he had not begun from absolute zero. He flipped through the book. This Tiandu Thunder Star Array could induce the attack of lightning, and it was divided into 2 versions. One version was the main array, which needed one to lay out 136 array stones. Even a level 5 array master was not able to control it freely, and could only set it up as a dead array. A so-called dead array was similar to the mountain protection great array. It could only be set up in a certain location, and would only be activated when an intruder entered into the bounds of the array. The advantage was that it was completely automatic and possessed great force. There were also a lot of disadvantages, however. Firstly, it could not be moved, so once it was set up somewhere, it would stay there. Secondly, it could not differentiate between enemies and friends, so one wrong step, and he could still activate the array to attack him. I could set up one here. It could block any enemies at the level of the spiritual pedestal tier, Ling Han mumbled. However, there were 136 array stones needed. How many materials would that need? He was definitely unable to set it up for the time being. There was another version which was a supplementary array. The power of this array was much smaller, but it only needed 36 array stones. It could be considered as the compact version of the main array. The advantage of this array was that it could be actively controlled completely by the array master and he could command it to attack as he desired, just like the little Tianyuan spirit snake array. Looks like I'm going to have to spend a lot. Thankfully, 3 bone-forming pills had been auctioned off for 7,000 2-star origin crystals, as well as a dozen over 1,000 1-star origin crystals, which would be enough to buy them. Ling Han huffed out a breath of air. Looking at things, array techniques were also extremely costly, and were not that much better than alchemy. However, though array masters could also earn money by helping another to set up a great array, once the array was set up, it could be used for more than 100, or even 1,000, 10,000 and more years. It was not a consumable item like alchemical pills. As a result, array masters most probably did not earn as much money as alchemists. Thankfully, I am the alchemy emperor. Otherwise, if I want to cultivate martial arts and have to refine array stones as well, how else would I earn so much money to burn? Ling Han shook his head. As he walked on the streets, he could clearly see that there were considerably more cultivators around him. The Northern Region Prodigy Tournament was about to begin, which would naturally attract cultivators to come. Some were here to participate in the tournament, whereas some were here to watch the excitement. Shui Gu Cheng, battle with me. A large shout was heard from somewhere ahead of him. You maniac, this is a busy street in the city. If we battle here, how many people would die? Both of us would be chased out of Extreme Yang City, an angry voice yelled back. Now that my battle spirit has arisen, I don't care about so much, come battle. A figure leaped up high. The figure was quite small in build, yet was wielding a heavy hammer that was much taller than him. Merely the hammer was taller and wider than his body. Idiot. Another person leaped up and jumped onto the roof of a building, then left quickly. Chapter 427, Stomping onto Ji De Rong. Shui Gu Cheng, ranked 20th on last year's Prodigy roll, cultivation level at the second layer of the spiritual pedestal tier. However, from what he could see today, he was shockingly already at the fourth layer of the spiritual pedestal tier. That was very normal. Beneath the flower blossom tier, there was a large number of alchemical pills that could speed up cultivation rate. There would definitely be powerful sects to support these kinds of geniuses, so they were absolutely capable of producing an overwhelming change in their cultivation in a year's time. And if it was not because he was worried that he would spoil things through excessive enthusiasm, Shui Gu Cheng's cultivation could possibly be even higher. For example, Zhu Xuan'er's information indicated that she was only in the second layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, yet now, she had shockingly advanced to the fifth layer. To these prodigies, their cultivation would differ greatly after every few months, so if one still looked at them based on the previous judgment, they would definitely be deceived. The person ranked after Shui Gu Cheng was Ji De Rong, and according to the information on the records, Ji De Rong was unwilling to accept his ranking. Thus, he would challenge the former every single time they met. That small figure just now must be Ji De Rong, which fit his description on the records very well. As the time for the Prodigy Tournament grew nearer, more and more characters from various backgrounds were beginning to show up. Ling Han shook his head. Qin Yi, Lu Yutong, and Zhu Wujiao all wanted to take part in the Prodigy Tournament this time. Moreover, they were very ambitious. Not only did they want to get onto the ranking list, they also wanted to fight for a high ranking, but from the look of things now, they did not have much hope. Initially, Qin Ye's cultivation was the highest, and he had the highest chance of getting a good position in the rankings. However, he had already broken through to the spiritual ocean tier before he refined the heavenly luck stone. Thus, unless he broke through to the spiritual pedestal tier, there would be no way for the heavenly luck stone to have effect on him. Thus, his current ability to challenge a superior opponent was at most equal to Zhu Wujiao's after the latter broke through to the spiritual ocean tier, and was far beneath Lu Yutong after she broke through to the spiritual ocean tier. If he was not able to gain an overwhelming advantage in terms of cultivation level, his battle prowess was definitely not as strong as Lu Yutong's. As Ling Han mused, he continued to walk towards Forget-Not. It was almost time for lunch. However, when he reached the restaurant, he shockingly saw that someone had punched a large hole into one of the side walls of the restaurant. It was currently under repair, so there was not one customer inside the restaurant. He frowned and asked, "What's going on here?" Just now, there were two maniacs fighting. One of them was hit and his body crashed this way, creating a large hole in the restaurant's wall. Thankfully, he only injured a few waiters, there were no fatalities, Zhu Wujiao said very gloomily. Ling Han was instantly angered and asked, did one of them have a small build, holding onto a hammer? Yes. Zhu Wujiao nodded, then asked in shock, how did young Master Han know? Ling Han did not answer his question, and instead turned around and left. Young Master Han, where are you going? Zhu Wujiao hurriedly caught up with him. Naturally to find those two bastards and call them to accounts, asking for compensation. Ling Han said with a dark expression. Young Master Han, those two are ranked on the prodigy roll, and both are in the spiritual pedestal tier. One is ranked 20th, whereas the other is ranked 21st. Zhu Wujiao said with a trembling voice. He had not known previously, but when he heard the discussions of passers-by later, he found out that those two maniacs actually had such impressive backgrounds. Ling Han did not even turn his head and said, so what? I'll give them a thrashing first, then drag them back to work for a month. Zhu Wujiao could not help but shiver. He knew that Ling Han was very powerful and had astonishing battle prowess. But there was still a large gulf of a whole major cultivation tier between them. Furthermore, Shui, Cheng and Ji De Rong were both characters on the prodigy roll, and similarly had impressive ability to challenge a stronger opponent than themselves. They were not to be trifled with. You stay here. There needs to be someone on standby at the restaurant, Ling Han said darkly. Yes, yes. Zhu Wujiao nodded. When he recalled that Ling Han was an earth-grade alchemist, he could not help but relax internally. Even if the person ranked first in the prodigy roll came, they'd still have to lower their heads and address him respectfully as Grandmaster when they saw Ling Han. How could he have forgotten that? He'd spent so much time worrying it pointlessly. Ling Han strode forwards, and made queries all the way. Shui, Cheng and Ji De Rong were battling furiously, so they naturally left a trail of witnesses behind them. At this moment, they were all discussing heatedly, so there was no need for Ling Han to deliberately ask as they were all talking about it. Thus, Ling Han very easily followed the battle trail that the two had left behind, but after over a dozen minutes, he heard a passerby say that the two had already concluded their battle and returned to their respective residences. Ling Han first followed that shorty with a small build holding a hammer. He queried all the way, and arrived in front of an inn. He gave a large shout, and called out, Shorty G, get out here. The inn that had been very noisy immediately became very quiet. What was going on here? Someone actually dared tell someone ranked 21st on the prodigy roll to get out, calling him Shorty G? That was practically poking a hornet's nest, right? Who did not know that even though Ji De Rong was not ranked first on the prodigy roll, in terms of fiery temper, he was definitely one of the top 3. Pung. True enough, a moment later, a window was crashed open, and a small figure leaped out. Initially, it was not possible for him to create much damage with such a small figure, but who asked him to have a huge hammer slung on his shoulder? Due to the collision, he had practically split the whole room into 2 halves. What bastard dares to insult your Lord Ji? Ji De Rong's eyes were wide with anger. To be able to stay on the prodigy roll, he could only be 30 years old at most, but looking at his whole face that was completely concealed by his sideburns and beard, he looked to be 40 years old or above. Ling Han walked over and said, You idiot, you damaged my restaurant. I am here to take you back to work as a waiter. Ha 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 ha. When Ji De Rong heard his words, he was initially dumbfounded, then laughed loudly. He had not heard wrongly, had he? Someone was actually here to capture him to work in their restaurant as a waiter? He looked Ling Han over a few times and said, You are quite interesting, but you should not joke around with your Lord Ji. Joking your sister. Ling Han leaped over, then raised one foot into the air which headed in a kick towards Ji De Rong's face. Insolence. Ji De Rong was enraged. Though he admired Ling Han's sense of humor, this young man actually dared to kick him. This was really too daring for him. He decided to make Ling Han suffer a little, but he would spare the latter's life, so that he could tell him a few jokes and relieve his boredom. He moved and casually grabbed Ling Han's foot. But his expression immediately changed greatly, because this kick from Ling Han possessed terrible force behind it, which gave rise to a cold feeling in him. Fuck, was this really a young man in the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier? Pung! A foot landed solidly onto Ji De Rong's face. Due to the great force behind it, he was undoubtedly trampled onto the ground. Peng! Instantly, a hold appeared on the ground as his whole head had sunk into the ground. There was much destructive power behind this kick. So what if Ji De Rong was someone ranked on the prodigy roll? The impact still knocked him unconscious. His limbs drooped uselessly around him, and he looked like a dead dog. Those around them had all paled in shock. There was a considerable number of cultivators in this inn. Some were here to take part in the upcoming prodigy tournament, while some were here to watch the tournament. Naturally, they all recognized who Ji De Rong was. But it was precisely this young elite that was knocked unconscious by one stomp of someone's foot. This instantly made a great number of people who had intended to take part in the tournament think of withdrawing. My gosh, with such a monster there, what was the point in participating? He could teach them the harshness of reality at any moment. All of a sudden, their surroundings were completely silent. Chapter 428, Finding Shui Gu Cheng again. Dark Angel _ Interesting. There was an open window on the 3rd floor of the inn, and a tall, slender man could be seen through it. He looked to be about 30 years old, but was extremely handsome. His hair was black and thick as well. He belonged to the category of extremely handsome, dashing young man that would make a woman go crazy. Yukuan Luan ranked first on the prodigy roll. However, he had just passed 30 years of age, and so was no longer qualified to participate in the prodigy tournament this year. Junior sister, this person should be one of your strongest opponents in the prodigy tournament, he said, turning his head. There was a girl standing beside the window too. She had a deity-like graceful bearing, with a shapely body which would draw covetous eyes to her. There was a thin silk veil hiding her face, but her beautiful features could vaguely be seen. Her black hair cascaded down her shoulders like a waterfall, and her complexion was fair like the most beautiful jade. She could easily stir up one's heart. She looked down below and said disdainfully, "Firstly, Ji De Rong was too careless." He completely had not thought that a person in the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier would have the battle prowess at the level of the spiritual pedestal tier. Secondly, Ji De Rong's battle prowess is only worth 10 battle stars. Junior sister really has high aspirations. 10 battle stars of battle prowess is only judged as only in your eyes. Yukuan Luan laughed loudly, and the eyes that looked upon that girl were obviously filled with adoration. This was an extreme genius that had just recently risen from the Great Mercy sect. Her name was Huang Han. She was only 22 years old this year, but her cultivation had already reached the 3rd layer of the spiritual pedestal tier. She had not participated in the prodigy tournament last year because her cultivation level at that time was too low, and it was only 2 years ago that she suddenly rose up powerfully. She advanced all the way at a terrifying speed, which alerted the higher ranks of the Great Sorrow sect. Currently, she was already included on the list of core disciples to be heavily developed by the sect. Yukuan Luan had come this time firstly to watch the battles, and secondly to serve as a protective escort for Huang Han. Huang Han acted as if she had not seen Yukuan Luan's adoring gaze upon her. Her aspirations were too high. Even if Yukuan Luan was currently ranked first on the prodigy roll, she was still unmoved. She idolized those geniuses from the middle state. She heard just 2 months ago that a genius from the middle state had appeared and had a great battle with the golden blood demonic ape in the dark devil forest, and even the flower blossom tier cultivators from the older generation paled in comparison to his brilliance. That was a real dragon amongst humans. On a tower farther away, Shinzhong Cheng's hand uncontrollably gripped the hilt of his sword, and his eyes that looked upon Ling Han were filled with battle spirit. He had already broken through to the spiritual pedestal tier since he was unable to obtain the heavenly luck stone. He could only break through when he had perfected his cultivation level. This young man would be worth a battle. Even further away, there was a plump young man who had squeezed into the crowd. He quietly moved and noiselessly removed the spatial ring from the hand of a young man at the spiritual pedestal tier. He walked to one side, giggled and said, "That tanned brother of mine seemed to have become stronger and stronger. Ling Han, we've met again." On another tall tower, Yan Tianzhao's figure appeared. At this moment, the aura exuding from him was shockingly that of the peak period of the spiritual pedestal tier. A green-colored light flickered within his eyes, and took form into various patterns which were extremely strange-looking. Ling Han picked Ji De Rong up, and with a wave of his hand, the blood-sucking origin gold was drawn. He used it to tie up the legs of the shorty, then went back the way he came. Chilla, like a piece of dirt cloth, Ji De Rong was dragged off by him. The spectators all hissed. That was an elite of the spiritual pedestal tier, and moreover someone on the prodigy roll. In the future, as long as he did not fall, he would definitely break through to the flower blossom tier. Yet he dragged him like he was a damn dog. Was that really proper? However, Ling Han was completely uncaring. It was not that he had never offended anyone in the flower blossom tier. Let's make a count. Ao Feng was one, Elder Nine Clouds was one, Yao Huiyu was another, so how could he fear someone that would only break through to the flower blossom tier in the future? He was now going off to find Shui Cheng. Since these two damaged his restaurant and wounded his staff, then before his employees recovered, these two guys would have to become waiters in his restaurant in compensation. This kick that Ji De Rong suffered was really heavy. He had actually not regained consciousness even when he was being dragged like this. Thankfully, spiritual pedestal tier cultivators endlessly used their origin power to refine their physical bodies, so they definitely had tough, sturdy skin, so it was alright even if he was being dragged along in this manner. Otherwise, he would have already been badly mangled. Ling Han made queries about where Shui Cheng had gone. When they saw that he was dragging a person behind him, the person he asked was a bit troubled, and dared not tell him. However, there were some who were motivated by the desire to see the world in chaos who happily told him where he could find Shui Cheng, and even took the initiative to lead him there. Shui Cheng was currently having an enjoyable time in the Listen to the Rain Pavilion. Listen to the Rain Pavilion. This was an extremely luxurious money-squandering establishment of the city. However, because payment could be settled with gold and silver, it was not such a big deal to cultivators. Any amount of gold and silver was only worldly objects, so they would naturally spend it freely for fun and entertainment. Ling Han was dragging the elite cultivator currently ranked 21st on the prodigy roll as he walked openly in the streets. This naturally caused a commotion and attracted more and more people to follow behind him, laughing all the way. This joke was really too big. Who is this young man that is actually capable of defeating Ji De Rong? Not sure. However, it's not because he is really stronger than Ji De Rong, but rather it was Ji De Rong who was too careless and provided him an opening that he could take advantage of. But no matter how careless he was, he's still a spiritual pedestal tier cultivator. Now that we're on the subject, didn't the white-robed Sword King also defeat quite a number of spiritual pedestal tier cultivators when his cultivation level was only at the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier? How could those spiritual pedestal tier cultivators compare with Ji De Rong? Furthermore, another year has passed, so no matter what, Ji De Rong's cultivation would have increased considerably, and he is definitely not one who can be defeated by an opponent in the spiritual ocean tier. You're making me more and more curious. Who exactly is this young man? Everyone were discussing and chatting noisily, all of them very curious. How did such a monstrous young man appear so suddenly? It was obvious that there would be a place for Ling Han in the new round of the Prodigy tournament. Furthermore, his rank would definitely not be low, either. Perhaps he might even be able to suppress the high rank that the white-robed Sword King had achieved 3 years ago. Firstly, Ling Han was stronger, and secondly, a great number of people had passed 30 years old and were taken off the prodigy roll. Ling Han walked in front, whereas the crowd walked behind. This troop was really quite majestic, and they walked all the way to the Listen to the Rain Pavilion. Toothpick Shui, get out here. Ling Han similarly called out like he had done previously. His voice was like thunder, and no matter how loud the music and dancing was inside, it could not conceal his thunderous volume. Ji De Rong, you bastard. If you want to fight, I am willing to oblige, but in another month, you're going to die. Shui Cheng's furious voice was heard, and within a short while, he had rushed out. Shui Cheng was much better than Ji De Rong appearance-wise. He had a slender, tall build, and a noble, dignified air around him. His bronze skin looked like he had had oil rubbed on his skin. When he rushed out, he realized that something was off. Ji De Rong was actually being dragged on the ground as if he was a dead dog. How could this be possible? He turned to look at Ling Han. In terms of power, he was actually on equal footing with Ji De Rong. The power gap between the two of them was really too small. If Ling Han was able to defeat Ji De Rong, then naturally he would be able to defeat him too. Who wanted to be embarrassed in public? Thus, unless there was no other option for it, he definitely did not want to get into a battle with Ling Han. Young man, where have I offended you? Shui Cheng asked seriously. Ling Han humphed, delivered another kick to Ji De Rong, and said, you and this idiot were fighting right out in the open street and damaged the wall of my restaurant. You two also caused injuries to a few of my staff. It is precisely a busy time when there is a shortage of staff. Thus, I can only take the two of you back so that you can work as waiters for a month as replacement. When everyone heard this, they felt the corners of their mouths twitch. For such a trivial, minuscule matter, he actually thrashed an elite cultivator on the prodigy roll to the extent that he resembled a dead dog? If Ji De Rong knew, he would definitely holler curses. When had elite cultivators on the prodigy roll become so cheap that they would actually be put on par with ordinary waiters? Chapter 429, Capturing to Work. Dark Angel _ After getting a kick, Ji De Rong finally woke up. His eyes snapped open, yet was still a little confused. However, he immediately realized that something was off, and shouted loudly all of a sudden, you brat, aren't you going to quickly let go of your grandpa Ji? Let us have a grand battle of 300 rounds. A defeated opponent still dares to speak bold words? Ling Han gave him another kick. That's because your grandpa Ji was too careless. Otherwise, a brat in the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier like you. Grandpa Ji would be able to crush you with one hand behind my back. Yet Ji De Rong continued to swear with absolutely no intention of admitting his defeat. Ling Han did not pay any further attention to him, but instead turned towards Shui Cheng and said, you come over here and allow me to give you a good thrashing, then I'll bring you back to work as a waiter in my restaurant. Hung. Shui Cheng sneered. When he heard Ji De Rong's words, he finally knew what was going on here. Ling Han was indeed very strong, but he was only in the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier. Ji De Rong had indeed been careless. And who was he? Shui Cheng, ranked 20th on the prodigy roll. At that time, the white-robed sword king was enough of a monster, right? Yet wasn't he still ranked after him? And now, he was in the 3rd layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, with battle prowess soaring straight up to 8 battle stars, so how could a mere cultivator in the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier stand against that? Then I shall come teach you a lesson, he said with a smile. Ji De Rong had been defeated by Ling Han, and if he now defeated Ling Han, how could Ji De Rong still have the face to challenge him to a fight again in future? Facing a boor like Ji De Rong, in truth, Shui Cheng felt very troubled. Ling Han waved his hand and 7 golden rods appeared. Wang, the array was activated and a white snake appeared in thin air. It gushed into Ling Han's body and forcibly increased his battle prowess by another 2 battle stars. Array Master? Shui Cheng was shocked. In this era, there were pitifully few array masters, they were even rarer than alchemists. However, they definitely should not be underestimated. Ling Han once again drew the demon birth sword. A lot of people had seen it before in the dark demonic forest anyways, so he couldn't bother to continue keeping it under wraps. The strongest cultivators in the North region were at most in the spiritual infant tier, and faced with his status as an earth-grade alchemist, they at least dared not snatch it from him in public. As for cultivators stronger than that, they could not make their way here. Even if they did, their prowess would be greatly suppressed and weakened. Before attempting such a journey, anyone would have to consider carefully if such a price was worth it. Shui Cheng instantly felt his knees become a little weak. Even if merely a sliver of aura seeped out of a level 10 spirit tool, how could it be ordinary? And that was still thanks to the fact that he had formed 7 flashes of qi and entered into the ranks of rulers, so there was not too serious an effect on him. Come battle. Ling Han smiled calmly. Shui Cheng felt a headache coming on. His opponent had an array as well as a high-level spirit tool. It appeared he had a terrifying background behind him. It seemed like he could draw out another priceless treasure at any time, which made his self-confidence take a sharp drop. But there was no turning back now. In front of so many people, how could he possibly shy away from battle? If it's a fight you want, then I shall oblige. With a great leap, he pounced. A cold light surged forth, and he, too, had drawn a spirit tool of his own. It was a long saber, and he slashed it furiously at Ling Han. No matter what, he was indeed much superior in terms of cultivation level, so he was at an absolute advantage in power. Thus, he had cast aside all kinds of flashy moves, intending to have a clash of brute force with Ling Han. This was the surest way for him to win this battle. Ling Han used the 4 seasons sword technique. Sword intent of the various seasons gushed forth in a continuous cycle, circulating according to his will. Compared with Lord Ji's instant defeat, Shui Cheng's condition was much, much better. At least he was capable of exchanging a number of blows with Ling Han, which made Ji De Rong extremely displeased. Didn't this mean that he was inferior to Shui Cheng then? Brat, you really do have some skill. Shui Cheng's true skill was forced out bit by bit. He no longer dared to have the slightest reservation. This young man was really much, much too strong. Ling Han, on the other hand, moved smoothly and skillfully. Though the benefits brought by the heavenly luck stone were not visible yet, after the installation of power from the Black Tower, there was an extremely big upgrade to his physique, and his personal battle prowess was on a completely different level from before. Who knew how much higher his current battle prowess was compared to 20 battle stars of the spiritual ocean tier? After all, he was capable of shaking an opponent with 8 battle stars in spiritual pedestal tier. This was something unbelievable to a great many of the spectators. The spectators all around them were already struck dumb. This was really too much of a monster, right? There was Cheng in the last round, but even he could only stand against an opponent in the first layer of the spiritual pedestal tier when his cultivation level was the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier. Yet Ling Han could stand on equal grounds with a cultivator at the 3rd layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, which forcefully raised the record by 2 whole levels. Drawing the saber to cut water, destroying emotion and cutting off roots. Shui Cheng shouted loudly and used a great move. His long saber slanted, and 7 flashes of saber chi surged, actually bringing along with them over 100 saber images that gushed forth towards Ling Han. Ling Han was slightly surprised. This saber technique was a bit like the mysterious 3000. However, his opponent's saber chi could only form over a dozen saber images, which was far from being capable of equaling the might of the mysterious 3000. Still, in terms of essence, these 2 techniques were the same. Indeed, there was no shortage of ability in the world. However, the inheritance of the Heaven's Sword sect could even be related to the realm of gods, and had existed for millennia without deteriorating. It was naturally not something that other sects could compare with. Ling Han did not step back, but rather advanced. At the very moment that his opponent used such a huge move, it was also the very same moment when his defense was at its weakest. When they saw that Ling Han actually went forth against the saber images, everyone was astonished. Though everyone knew that this moment was the time when Shui Cheng's defense was the weakest, the problem was, with such a terrifying attack ahead, after forcefully parrying so many saber flashes, he himself would be severely wounded, so how could he still possibly be able to launch his own attack on Shui Cheng? But what shocked them was that Ling Han's figure waved and bent as if he was a withered leaf dancing in the wind. His nimble movements allowed him to weave smoothly around all obstructions in his way and appear in front of Shui Cheng. He was now capable of shooting out 1,000 sword flashes, and so was naturally very familiar with this kind of attack. Additionally, he also had the divine sense of the heaven tier, which allowed him to successfully accomplish what to everyone seemed to be an impossible feat. Pung! Ling Han shot out a fist, which solidly landed on Shui Cheng's face. Aya! Shui Cheng yelled in pain, and was instantly knocked over onto the ground. He had passed out completely from the blow. With a wave of his hand, the blood-sucking origin galls became even longer and thinner. Ling Han tied Shui Cheng up as well. Who is so bold that dares to make trouble at my Listen to the Rain Pavilion? An arrogant voice was heard, and a young man walked out of the tower. But the moment he saw Ling Han, his whole body shook, and he dared not utter one more word. Instead, he simply turned around and fled. It was precisely Lu Qiyuan. How could he not be afraid of Ling Han? He hadn't even done anything. He had only threatened him a bit and went to his restaurant one time, yet was almost beaten to death by his own grandfather. And to give Ling Han an explanation, his grandfather had even destroyed the Lang clan. That was a god of misfortune. Whoever dared trifle with him would be hit with bad luck. There were naturally some who recognized Lu Qiyuan among the crowds, and when they saw him behave like a mouse that had encountered a cat when he saw Ling Han, they all were shocked. In terms of martial arts and power, Ji De Rong and Shui Cheng were naturally far superior to Lu Qiyuan, but in terms of status, as the grandson of an Earth-grade alchemist, the latter did not have a low status and was in fact a local bully around these parts. Yet even Lu Qiyuan was so scared of Ling Han. Exactly what background did this young man have? Ling Han merely smiled. Dragging Shui Cheng and Ji De Rong behind him, he left. Brat, release your grandpa Ji this instant. Ji De Rong yelled. His cultivation had been sealed by Ling Han, so he could only crawl on the ground with 2 hands like a dog. Though it looked a bit pathetic, it was still better than being dragged off. Speak less rubbish and obediently work for me for a month. Ling Han humphed. Chapter 430, Special Training. Dark Angel _ When they saw Ling Han return dragging 2 dead dogs behind him, everyone in Forget Not were dumbfounded. That was too awesome, wasn't it? Those 2 were geniuses close to the top 20 on the prodigy roll, and Ling Han simply knocked them out just like that? By now, Lu Yutong and the others had returned as well. Naturally, they were made aware of the situation and they, too, were extremely shocked. Ling Han actually managed to easily capture 2 elite cultivators on the prodigy roll. That kind of battle prowess was really too astonishing. Ling Han withdrew the blood-sucking origin gold and said, Wujiao, you watch over them and have them work hard. If they dare to goof off, give them a good thrashing. There's no need to be reserved. He had already sealed off both their cultivation. Yes. Zhu Wujiao hurriedly nodded. Since that was what Ling Han had said, then no matter what, he would obey. Who cared what sect or faction stood behind these 2? Shui Cheng returned to consciousness, but with his cultivation sealed, he could only bow his head and concede. Otherwise, if he was really thrashed by a minor character like Zhu Wujiao, how could he bear with the humiliation? Ji De Rong had complained the whole way, but had also become obedient. The both of them really did obediently carry trays and serve dishes. They had really become waiters in the restaurant. The hole in the wall had been temporarily blocked up, and the restaurant was once again in business. As it was well known, there was naturally no shortage of customers, and there were some who had followed Ling Han all the way here. When they saw that there were 2 elites on the prodigy roll working as waiters here, how could they not come in for a meal too? In the future, if they said that they had once been served by someone on the prodigy roll before, wouldn't that attract massive amounts of envy? When they got hold of the menu, they first experienced a shock. What kind of damn thing was this? The price of one dish was actually one origin crystal. But when they saw that so many others had already placed their orders, added together with the fact that the aroma was indeed tempting, they, too, could not help but order a dish to have a taste. There was naturally no need to explain the result of their decision. Waiter, give me another serving of this extreme treasure. Me too. Here too. Shui, Cheng and Ji De Rong really wanted to cry but had no tears left. Just think, the two of them were ranked elite cultivators on the prodigy roll, yet they had now fallen to the level of waiters carrying serving trays. What was even more depressing was the fact that the business of this place was extremely booming, which made them race and scramble back and forth. This was even more tiring than fighting in a battle. How many of you want to take part in the prodigy tournament? On the third floor, Ling Han asked the group. Me. 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 Lu Yutong and the others all raised their hands. Except for Li Sichan and Guang Yuan, everyone expressed their desire to participate. Even Hu Niu raised her small hand high up into the air. Ling Han gave them a look over. Qin was now in the third layer of the spiritual ocean tier and had 9 battle stars of battle prowess. Lu Yutong was in the first layer of the spiritual ocean tier, and her battle prowess was 10 battle stars. Zhu Wujiao was in the first layer of the spiritual ocean tier, with battle prowess of 9 battle stars. He said, there is still about a month's time. Let me think of how to give you guys some special training and help you all increase your battle prowess to at least 15 battle stars. Otherwise, it'd be better for you not to go and embarrass yourselves. There's just 1 month, can we really improve so much? Lu Yutong was a little disbelieving. Ling Han showed off what looked to be the smile of a demon and replied, believe me. As long as you all will not have died, it will not be difficult for you to reach 15 battle stars. When they saw that kind of smile on his face, Lu Yutong and the others all shivered, feeling coldness wrap around their entire bodies. They felt a strong sense of foreboding. Ling Han rubbed Hu Niu's head and said, from the looks of the current situation, only Niu would be able to get into the ranks, and it would not be hard for her to make it into the top 10. He paused a moment, then said, if Niu breaks through to the spiritual pedestal tier, then the first place would be in the bag. Hee hee. Hu Niu laughed proudly, showing off her little white teeth. Lu Yutong and the others were all astonished. They had never imagined that Ling Han would judge Hu Niu so highly. This was just a 6-year-old little girl. Moreover, Hu Niu was going to break through to the spiritual pedestal tier. Hiss. Wait, young Master Han, are you not participating? Zhu Wujiao asked blankly. Che, there's no prize, so why would I participate? Ling Han fanned his hand, waving off the question. Qin was shocked and exclaimed, young Master Han, being able to rank onto the prodigy roll represents the ultimate glory. Ling Han merely smiled. As someone who had once been the Alchemy Emperor and an elite cultivator of the Heaven tier in his last life, did he need a ranking on the prodigy roll to prove himself? Moreover, after he had met Yao Huiyu, he had increasingly not taken this prodigy roll seriously. Niu is enough. Get first place, give Ling Han. Hu Niu declared, patting her little chest. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, all right, then this time will depend on Niu. 2 geniuses on the prodigy roll had actually regressed to working as waiters in a restaurant. This naturally created a tumultuous commotion. Every day, there would be visitors attracted to come. Their initial reason was naturally to experience the wonderful feeling of being served by someone fond the prodigy roll. However, as long as they had eaten the precious delicacies of Forget-Not, there would definitely be huge groups of return customers. Unfortunately, there was limited space in the restaurant. Even if it opened from morning all the way to late night, customers had still lined up in long queues, which made Lu Yutong think of opening up a branch. After getting Ling Han's approval, she immediately began looking for a new venue in high spirits. In the blink of an eye, another 10 days had passed, and Lu Yutong and the others have also experienced a real hell-like cultivation session within the Black Tower. Ling Han was really training them to the point of near death. The difficulty of their training was enough to cause shivers. Every day, when their training had ended, they would immediately fall asleep the moment they lay down. This also caused Lu Yutong's plan to choose a new venue to be postponed until further notice. However, the effects were also extremely shocking. After squeezing out the potential hidden in all of them, the cultivation of Lu Yutong and the others had very visibly improved. This made Guang Yuan envious, and he, too, joined them for the training. As a result, very soon, they experienced both pain and pleasure at the same time. The four's cultivation improved very quickly, but this experience had also become a nightmare that would follow them for the rest of their lives. Ling Han went off to the Spirit Treasures Pavilion again and made some more queries about the 9-leaf black Ganoderma, but Yin Hong still told him to wait. He then went to Forget Not. At this moment, Lu Yutong and the others were training like crazy in the Black Tower, so he naturally had to take charge of more of the restaurant's matters. Get lost. However, he had just arrived at Forget Not and had not yet entered when two people stopped him from going further. What a joke, this was his business, and there was actually someone hailing him over in front of his own business. This whole place has been reserved by my young master. It will not serve any others today, so get lost. Get lost. One man waved his hand at Ling Han disdainfully. Ling Han frowned. He had never allowed the whole restaurant to be reserved before. Looks like this so-called young master had done so by force. Since the latter had done things forcefully, he would not be reserved either. He directly stretched out both hands and picked up the two of them. Then he pulled the two of them towards each other. The two of them were knocked unconscious. He walked in and saw that his waiters were trembling with fear. Meanwhile, Shui, Cheng and Ji De Rong had a few footprints on their bodies. Obviously, they had been kicked. There was only a single table in the whole hall on the first floor, where a young man sat. He had an arrogant demeanor as if he wanted nothing more to walk around with his nose pointing up at the sky. He was at most 20 years old, and there were 4 servants standing behind him. All of them wore expressions of flattery. Hey, the taste is really not bad. Really not bad, the young man said, as he continued eating. Ling Han walked over, and those 4 servants immediately turned towards Ling Han, and rebuked, "My young master has booked this whole place. Get out of here." "This is the first time that I have heard that the owner can't even enter his own place," Ling Han stated calmly. "Oh, so you're the boss of this restaurant?" The young man glanced towards Ling Han, beckoned him over, and said, "You don't have to open up business this month. After I have finished watching the Prodigy tournament, you just follow me back. I guarantee that it will not be your loss." "Aren't you going to thank young Master Long?" the 4 servants reprimanded at the same time. Chapter 431, Zhu Xuan'er's younger brother Dark Angel _ Ling Han smiled and said, "Really, thanks a lot." That young Master Long looked very pleased with himself, but he had just barely completed the thought when he felt his vision darken. With a bang, his face was already crashed onto the table. With such a huge impact, the whole table split apart into multiple pieces, and his face was covered in soup. "How dare you!" the 4 servants yelled furiously and moved to grab Ling Han. Peng, 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 peng. Ling Han instantly shot out 4 punches. The 4 servants gripped their chests tightly, their faces pale. They fell seated on the ground, feeling as if they had a breath of air that was stuck in their air pipes. It was too horrible a feeling for mere words to describe. "Fuck, who asked you to be arrogant?" Ji De Rong rushed forwards and gave the 4 of them a round of punches and kicks. His cultivation had been sealed, and he had served dishes a bit too slowly. Furthermore, he was an elite cultivator on the prodigy roll, so it was inevitable that he would have his own pride. As a result, that young man ordered his lackeys to give him a few harsh kicks. If it was not for the fact that he had the origin power of spiritual pedestal tier to refine his physical body, he would definitely have been severely wounded by now. As the saying went, when a tiger leaves the mountains and reached the plains, it'd be bullied by a dog. How could he not feel resentful? Shui Cheng's expression was not much better than his own. However, he was not as rash as Ji De Rong, and furthermore, did not want to fall to the same level as those servants. Ling Han thought for a moment, stretched out his hand and, with a brush, unsealed the cultivation of both Ji De Rong and Shui Cheng. He said, because the two of you have performed acceptably these 10 days, I'll consider the debt paid. Shui Cheng and Ji De Rong were a bit disbelieving until they felt the origin power gushing forth within their bodies. That was when they felt they had woken up from a dream. They were both extremely rueful. In these 10 days when their cultivation was sealed, they lived like normal people, which allowed them to have a taste of a different life than their own. It seemed like they had unexpectedly obtained a deeper comprehension in martial arts as a result. Bastard, you actually dare to injure me? Young Master Long got to his feet. There was still a piece of carrot dangling about the corner of his lips, and his whole face was covered in soup. His expression was one filled with absolute fury. Do you know who I am? Hearing such a familiar line, I can probably guess that you have a very awesome elder brother, or perhaps father. Ling Han asked, smiling. Wrong, I have an incredibly awesome elder sister. Young Master Long exclaimed proudly. Pa, he was once again knocked down onto the ground by a smack from Ling Han. Really an idiot that doesn't learn. Ling Han shook his head. Ji De Rong looked at the young man and said fiercely, Han, just hand over this brat to to me to deal with, okay? He licked his lips, fire in his eyes. This young man was only in the 7th layer of the gushing spring tier, yet he was actually thrashed by such a minor character. If he did not repay this favor, how could he still be considered human? In comparison, he was more convinced by Ling Han's power. The latter was indeed very strong, and he could not defeat him. You all dare. Young Master Long shouted loudly, my elder sister is Xuan'er. Ji De Rong and Shui Cheng both exclaimed in surprise. Xuan'er, not only was she a well-known beauty of the North region, she was also well on the path to become the strongest of the younger generation of the North region. Her future accomplishment might possibly even exceed the spiritual infant tier. They could offend anyone except for Xuan'er, because she had too much influence. She needed only to call out, and how many young geniuses were willing to go through water and tread on fire for her sake? Peng, young Master Long was once again smacked onto the ground by Ling Han's hand. What are you shouting for? Pay compensation. Ling Han said fiercely. Pay compensation? Pay what compensation? Young Master Long looked very surprised. He was the obvious victim here, wasn't he? You broke a table in my restaurant, so shouldn't you pay for it? Ling Han asked fiercely. It was obviously you who smacked my head onto the table. Young Master Long said weakly. With a bang, he was once again smacked onto the floor tiles, and created a hole in the floor. How dare you, you actually broke the floor tiles in my restaurant. Ling Han exclaimed darkly. Young Master Long felt very wronged. He was obviously being thrashed by Ling, so why was he the one being blamed? However, after being smacked consecutively for a few times, he finally realized how things were. Ling Han was even more arrogant and forceful than he was, and was unreasonable too. A person like him was usually arrogant, but was most afraid of encountering someone fiercer than them. Now, after being unreasonably beaten by Ling Han a few times, he was finally afraid. I'll pay. He asked obediently, how much? Ling Han snatched the spatial ring that he was wearing, directly erased the divine sense that he had left on it, and swept his own divine sense within. There were actually a few thousand origin crystals inside. He could not help but smile and said, I'll just take this sum, I won't bear a grudge for it being too little. You are practically committing robbery here. Young Master Long complained. Ling Han tossed him a glare. Young Master Long hurriedly shook his head and said, of course. Of course. You can get lost now. With a casual toss of his hand, Ling Han had thrown young Master Long out, and did the same with his 4 servants. Just you wait and see, I will definitely come back. After young Master Long had raced off a certain distance, he cast out a line that fit the situation, then broke out into a mad run again. Ling Han could not help but laugh loudly. Profligate young masters were really profligate young masters, they only knew how to use their powerful connections as an intimidation tactic. Ling Han, 20 days later, I shall see you at the Prodigy Tournament. By then, I will definitely not lose to you. Shui Cheng declared coldly. Ling Han had heard about the rules of the Prodigy Tournament before. In this kind of battle, it was not allowed to use any kind of alchemical pill or spirit tool to prevent an unjust battle. However, the Spirit Treasures Pavilion would prepare a great amount of weapons which were all forged from level 5 materials. Thought they were not spirit tools, they were extremely sturdy, and could sustain the powerful attacks of the spiritual pedestal tier. In Shui Cheng's eyes, Ling Han had been able to defeat him merely because he had the demon birth sword. Thus, since the Prodigy Tournament did not allow the use of spirit tools, he naturally had a high chance of victory. Ling Han was too lazy to explain. He only waved him off. He'd just have Hunyo ravaged Shui Cheng by then. Ji De Rong broke into a run and fled as well. After being tortured by Ling Han for 10 days, he was filled with wariness of the former, and so naturally wanted to maintain a big distance from this demon. Young Master Long, whose real name was Zhu Longxing, was indeed Zhu Xuan'er's younger brother. In truth, his martial arts talent was not too bad either, but compared with Zhu Xuan'er, there was a very big gap. Furthermore, he did not have the heated drive to pursue martial arts. As a result, since he only liked to have fun and play around, he was currently only in the 7th layer of the Gushing Spring tier. How could he bear to swallow such a huge loss by himself? He immediately raced off to look for help, and his first choice was someone who had just recently addressed him as brother and mingled with closely Lu Qiyuan. When he arrived at Listen to the Rain Pavilion, Lu Qiyuan received him warmly. Good wine and good food, and there were beauties and singers to accompany him as well, fully giving him face. Big brother Qiyuan, I was bullied by someone today. After drinking a few cups of wine, Zhu Longxing could no longer hold back and began to grumble about his grievances to Lu Qiyuan. What, there is actually someone who dares to bully a brother of Lu Qiyuan, me, in this extreme young city? Tell me, who is so bold? I shall go and cut off his head for you. Lu Qiyuan immediately declared, patting his chest. Thank you, big brother Qiyuan. Zhu Longxing quickly offered his thanks. I've made my queries. That guy's name is Ling Han. Pooh. Lu Qiyuan suddenly spat out a mouthful of wine directly onto Zhu Longxing. This made Zhu Longxing very confused. They were having a nice conversation, so what do you mean by suddenly spitting wine in my face? Cool. 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 Lu Qiyuan coughed unstoppably. He hurriedly drank some tea to calm himself, and with hope that things were not like what he had thought, said, It can't be Ling Han from Forget Not, right? It's indeed that guy. Pooh, Lu Qiyuan spat again. Extraordinarily accurately, it was Zhu Longxing's face again. Zhu Longxing. 10,000 curse words flew through his mind. Fuck, I'll forget about you spitting at me once, but twice? Do I have some kind of enmity with you? Chapter 432, Results of the Special Training. Dark Angel _ Big Brother Qiyuan, Zhu Longxing began weakly. You spat 2 times consecutively at me, and every time was so extraordinarily accurate, hitting my face directly. You did it on purpose, didn't you? Lu Qiyuan's expression became serious. He warned, don't you ever trifle with that guy. Big brother Qiyuan, why is it that even you are scared of that guy? Zhu Longxing asked strangely. Not only you and I should not trifle with that guy, even if your elder sister was here and my grandfather moved personally, they would be able to do nothing against him either. Lu Qiyuan said, shaking his head. How could that be possible? Zhu Longxing exclaimed in shock. He is an earth-grade alchemist. Lu Qi Yuan revealed the secret. Pooh. Zhu Longxing spat out his mouthful of tea, and very coincidentally, it was right onto Lu Qi Yuan's whole face. He suddenly erupted into a long bout of coughing. Earth-grade alchemist? A young man who was not even 20 years old yet? That was really too shocking. Lu Qi Yuan could not help but wear a bitter expression. You did it on purpose, didn't you? Smearing my whole face in revenge, right? But it was he who had first spat at Zhu Longxing, so it would not be appropriate for him to say anything in rebuke. There was naturally a beautiful female attendant who delivered a wet towel for him to wipe his face. Really? Zhu Longxing finally spoke. Lu Qi Yuan sighed, thinking, am I that kind of fellow who would be willing to be spat on just for the sake of a lie? He nodded and said, listen to my advice, and don't trifle with that guy. Previously, I offended him, and was almost beaten to death by Grandpa. Hiss, so ruthless. Zhu Longxing was extremely shocked and exclaimed, Big Brother Qi Yuan, you're the only descendant of the Lu clan. There's nothing to be done. Just think, how old is that guy now, but yet he's already an earth-grade alchemist. It's very possible for him to become a heaven-grade alchemist in future. So do you think that my grandpa should give him face or not? Lu Qi Yuan shook his head. Zhu Longxing's face was also filled with astonishment. When he thought that his elder sister was currently looking for heaven-grade alchemists, and if Ling Han became a heaven-grade alchemist, then with his sister who had a request to make of him, how would he be able to measure up to Ling Han? Perhaps, this guy might even possibly become his brother-in-law. Brother-in-law? That didn't sound too bad. With an earth-grade alchemist, or even a heaven-grade alchemist as his brother-in-law, how awesome was that? Thank you, Big Brother Qi Yuan. I almost caused a big mess. He breathed out a breath of relief. As the day of the Prodigy tournament grew increasingly closer, there were also more and more young elite cultivators appearing in Extreme Yang City. It was inevitable that young people would be impetuous, and fights and trouble were unavoidable. However, no other fight happened in Forget Not. There was nothing to be done. 2 elites on the Prodigy roll worked here for about 10 days, and they were both about the 20th place. This made all those ranked below 20 think of this restaurant as some place sacred. If you want to make trouble here, no matter what, you should be more powerful than Shui, Cheng and Ji De Rong. Moreover, even Zhu Xuan'er's younger brother met with a defeat here, yet there was no sign of Zhu Xuan'er coming here to stand up for her brother, which showed how strong the background the restaurant's owner had. It wasn't that no one had borne any devious schemes, but with 2 such shocking situations there, who would dare attempt sponging off a Forget Not? Another 20 days passed. The Prodigy tournament would begin officially tomorrow. Within the Black Tower, Ling Han finally ceased the special training for Lu Yutong and the others. Today would be for them to take a good rest, and from the next day onwards, it would a real battle. When they came out from the Black Tower, all of them exuded a terrifying aura. After this 1 month of hell training, they were practically able to kill anyone in their way, whether it was a human or a ghost. Kenye's cultivation was the highest. He had reached the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier. Guang Yuan had returned to the 9th layer as well, whereas Lu Yutong was at the 8th layer. Zhu Wujiao was the weakest, but even he had reached the 7th layer. The reason why they had managed to improve so quickly was because Ling Han had used golden needle ferrying acupuncture points on them to stimulate their hidden potential. That was how they managed to improve so much in a mere month's time. But this was squeezing out their inner potential. It meant sacrificing their future rate of cultivation as a price, but to obtain a good ranking in the Prodigy tournament, they couldn't care about it anymore. A single person could only use this kind of secret art in their whole lifetimes. If they used it a second time, their power would still increase greatly, but the problem was that their power would continue to increase uncontrollably until their physical body could no longer contain it. Their bodies would then explode and they would die. Furthermore, this was only useful before the flower blossom tier. After breaking through to the flower blossom tier, the cultivator would have cast off his mortal shell, and this kind of technique to stimulate one's hidden potential would no longer be effective. Golden Needle ferrying acupuncture points, combined with the Hell training session, was what allowed them to possess the current shocking cultivation rate. Ling Han and Hu Niu, on the other hand, were still at the peak of the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier. Ling Han possessed 2 spiritual oceans. One turned clockwise and the other counterclockwise, as if they were 2 millstones. Thus, when his cultivation increased, his origin power was only polished to become ever sturdy, but his cultivation rate was still a bit too fast and he still needed some more time to reach perfection. It would happen within these few days. He would be able to break through to the spiritual pedestal tier. After a night of rest, all the young people gathered at the great arena of Extreme Yang City. This was the property of the Spirit Treasures Pavilion. And with the enormous amount of wealth in their possession, this great arena had been constructed for the purpose of the Prodigy Tournament that would happen every 3 years. Thus, this place appeared to be very majestic and grand, and could accommodate 200,000 spectators at any one time. The circular and high spectator stands looked as if they were mountains. The first step was naturally to register. The preliminary condition for registration was to be below 30 years old. There was no other restriction. The second step was to test battle prowess. There was a stone plaque used to test one's battle prowess at the registration area. It was created by a great person in ancient times. After one shot out a full power attack at it, it would show the corresponding number of battle stars. Everyone could be ranked according to battle stars, but exactly how many would be able to make it to the actual tournament? That would depend on how many people had left the prodigy role from the last round. Subtracting those who had left due to age, as well as those that had not managed to make it in time or might even have died, the remaining people would automatically qualify for the actual tournament. There was a total of 56 this time round. Thus, a total of 144 people out of all those who came to register would be able to qualify for the actual tournament. These 200 people would draw lots based on the concept of everyone on the rankings would encounter one another and enter into a knockout battle. The last 100 remaining would be the elites of the new prodigy role of the northern region. As for how the remaining would be ranked, that was simple. They would simply battle. Every person would have a battle with the other 99 competitors, and their final rank would be calculated based on the number of their losses and victories. Then, let's go first test our battle prowess. Ling Han's group headed towards the location of the testing stone plaque. Because there was only 200 people who could qualify for the actual tournament, those ranked below 200 were naturally automatically eliminated, and there was no need for them to register. Hey, hey, hey. Did you all see that? A monster appeared just now. He is in the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier, but his battle prowess is as high as 20 stars. He can almost surge up to spiritual pedestal tier. I know, that guy's name is Chu Xiaozhu, but no one knows where he came from. He's very mysterious. This guy can almost stand equal to Shenzhong Cheng from the previous round. He should be slightly inferior to Shenzhong Cheng. The white-robed Sword King is one that could defeat opponents in spiritual pedestal tier. Shenzhong Cheng, too, had reached the 9th layer of spiritual ocean tier just slightly over a year ago, and he has continuously polished himself since. That was why he could slice a spiritual pedestal tier opponent with his sword, and this Chu Xiaozhu may not be inferior. That's right. Chu Xiaozhu is only 19 years old. They had just reached the place when they already heard the crowds embroiled in heated discussions. There would appear a few monsters with every prodigy role. The last round could deserve the name of the Golden Roll, whereupon such extreme geniuses like Xuan'er, Zui, Lu Yang, and Shenzhong Cheng. It was yet unknown how this round would be. Chapter 433, Registration begins. Dark Angel _ Now that we're on the subject, it would still be that person this morning that's more powerful. He's already in the 1st layer of the spiritual pedestal tier when he's only 21 years old. Furthermore, his battle prowess is as high as 12 battle stars. What? There was actually someone with battle prowess exceeding 10 1-stars. What's his name? Ping. Never heard of him. Indeed, never heard of him. According to the information when he registered, he came from abroad. Hey. Then that means he's come from the ocean outside the North region, really? Who knows? No wonder we never heard of him. Some of them had already arrived here early in the morning. As a result, they had not missed anything from start to finish and knew what amazing new geniuses had appeared in the process of registration. In truth, some of these new geniuses were not really that young in age. They had just missed participating in the last tournament for various reasons, but managed to make it for this one. That was very common. After all, being ranked on the prodigy roll was only an empty name. If they were at the crucial point in the fight for precious treasures, who would be willing to give up the battle and rush all the way here to participate in the tournament? Grandmaster Ling. Ling Han and the others were standing in the queue when they saw someone ahead of them call out to them, even deliberately walking towards them. Furthermore, there was quite a number, and they were precisely the few people that they had met at the Falling Moon Gorge. Gu Fenghua, Chi Hualan, Lin Xiangqin, and the others. Now that over half a year had passed, their respective cultivation levels have all arrived at the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier, but not one had managed to break through to the spiritual pedestal tier yet. From the look of things, it was not that they were not able to, but rather that they were strengthening their foundations. To force their cultivation level to rise just for an empty title? That would be spoiling things through excessive enthusiasm, causing too much damage to their future cultivation. How could anyone who managed to be ranked in the prodigy roll not understand that fact? How long would they be able to maintain their pride due to being ranked on the prodigy roll? At most a dozen or so years, but they were people who could possibly break through to the flower blossom tier in future, whereupon their lifespans would be as long as 300 years, so what did a mere dozen or so years of fame count as? How could they choose to gain little at the price of a greater loss? It's been a long time. Ling Han raised his clasped hands in their direction in greeting. They all began to chat about recent events, and it was naturally inevitable that they would talk about the aggressive battle between the Rain Emperor, Yao Huiyu, and the demonic ape in the dark demon forest. Anyone would want to be like Yao Huiyu. I will become the second spear master in this world, Su Wentong laughed. If one could be like Grandmaster Ling and become an earth-grade alchemist, wouldn't they similarly be well-known and acclaimed all over the world? Lin Xiangqin laughed lightly, her seductive charms overflowing. She and Yinhong had different kind of charms but achieved the same result. They were both natural beauties. This guy and Yao Huiyu are both monsters. However, one is a monster in martial arts, and the other is a monster in alchemy, Gu Fenghua said ruefully. Yet Chi Hualan said very seriously, Grandmaster Ling's talent in martial arts is not low, either. All of them were momentarily stunned. They had subconsciously forgotten about his talent in martial arts primarily because Ling Han's achievement in alchemy was too dazzling since he had already become an earth-grade alchemist at the mere age of 17. When this guy was in the Gushing Spring tier, he had already slashed an opponent at the spiritual ocean tier, and now that he had broken through to the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier, would he be able to defeat a foe in the spiritual pedestal tier? Furthermore, he was currently only 18 years old. Don't you all worry. I am not going to participate in this prodigy tournament. Ling Han smiled. You almost scared this pervert to death. If you were going to participate, you would definitely snatch one place, and perhaps I'll be out of the running as a result, Gu Fenghua said, patting his chest in an exaggerated expression of relief. Grandmaster Ling does not think that this prodigy role is worth his time. Lin Xiangqin threw him an enchanting glance, tempting one's emotions to stir. In truth, she was not actually trying to seduce Ling Han, but rather she was just born this way. Unintentionally and without conscious will, she would be tossing out seductive glances left and right. What bold words. Someone at the side immediately wanted to express their disbelief. Crossing his arms over his chest, the man wore a disdainful expression. When they saw that their eyes had turned to him, he gave himself a thumbs up. I am Diawanda from the Blood Flame Valley. If you are unconvinced, I will thrash you all to mush. The Blood Flame Valley, no wonder he spoke with such arrogance. There were 4 most powerful parties in the North region, 1 valley and 3 sections. The single valley was the Blood Flame Valley, which even managed to develop a genius of the likes of Zui. They were all young and rash, so they were naturally unwilling to concede and all directed furious glares at the intruder. Yet Ling Han merely waved his hand and said, "You don't have to drop down to the level of such minor characters." "That's right. Who are we? Why do we need to bear a grudge against this kind of minor character? If we really come up against him, we should just directly kill him in a single strike." Gu Fenghua and the others nodded respectively, yet it caused Shi Wende's face to turn ashen in fury. He had deliberately provoked them because he saw that there were a few extremely gorgeous beauties among their group. The reason why he had done so was naturally to attract the attention of the beauties, but he had not foreseen that they would completely regard him as unimportant. "Damn guys, wait until you witness my battle prowess. I'll see how scared you will be then." Shi Wende thought, but restrained himself from making any move. Martial artists would naturally express themselves with their fists. Without enough power, whatever they said would merely be empty words. "It's the turn of the 7 sons of the Ao clan," someone exclaimed ahead, and indeed, Ao Xinglai and his brothers filed out and arrived in front of the testing stone plaque. However, Ao Xinglai and Ao Yuanwei were already on the prodigy roll, and thus automatically gained the right to enter the actual tournament. Now that half a year had passed, there were actually 3 among the 7 sons of the Ao clan that have managed to break through to the spiritual pedestal tier. They were Ao Xinglai, Ao Yuanwei and Ao Cheng. Ao Cheng was the 7th yet actually managed to surpass those before him, which was quite strange. The remaining 5 sons of the Ao clan that did not automatically gain the right to participate in the actual tournament tested their battle prowess respectively, and they all were judged as having 15 battle stars and above of battle prowess. This showed that even though there was no increase to their cultivation level in this half year, there was much increase in their battle prowess. Furthermore, Ao Cheng actually had the battle prowess of 3 battle stars at spiritual pedestal tier. He would definitely qualify into the top 40 in the prodigy role. Of course, this was based on the average battle prowess of the last tournament. It may not be a sure thing this year. I and Yuanwei want to test our battle prowess too. Would you mind? Ao Xinglai said with a smile to the few people who were responsible for registration. Of course not, please. They all nodded. They of course had to give some face to the heroes and elites on the prodigy roll. Ao Xinglai nodded and said to Ao Yuanwei, "Second, you first." Ao Yuanwei nodded expressionlessly. Ever since he had broken through to the spiritual pedestal tier, he had always been unwilling to concede to being ranked as second, and wanted very much to replace Ao Xinglai as the strongest. Yet there was never a good chance for that, so he would take advantage of this opportunity to let the latter witness his battle prowess. He drew a long saber from the weapons rack at one side. This was forged from level 5 materials, and could absolutely withstand the overwhelming power of spiritual pedestal tier. He focused, calmed himself, and after at least 3 breaths, he suddenly struck out with a powerful slash. Hong! 7 flashes of saber chi surged forth, yet they slashed the same spot on the stone plaque together with the actual blade, which focused all the attack power on such a small area whereupon it exploded. For a test like this, rather than battle prowess, it would be more appropriate to say that it was a test of the most powerful destructive attack. Under normal conditions, there was no chance for you to prepare for 3 breaths before striking. If you really did such a stupid thing, who knew how many times you would have already been killed? Wang, wang, wang. The letters on the 5th row lit up consecutively. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 stars of spiritual pedestal tier of battle prowess. This was very uncommon. Because when one had just broken through to the spiritual pedestal tier, one would naturally focus on raising one's cultivation level. When would they actually have time to polish their origin power? It was more natural to leave strengthening one's foundations for when one had reached the 9th layer. He really deserves the name of the 2nd son in the Ao clan. That kind of battle prowess would be the 7th or 8th place in the last tournament. So strong. Who knows, he may be able to surpass the eldest son of the Ao clan this time. Hee, if the second son of the Ao clan could improve so much, how could it be that the eldest son can't? Let's just see how Ao Xinglai measures up. The spectators all focused their stares on Ao Xinglai. Chapter 434, Testing Battle Prowess Dark Angel _ Ao Xinglai smiled arrogantly and drew a long sword from the weapons rack. However, he did not make any kind of preparation beforehand, and instead directly struck forth with his sword. Wang, wang, wang. Similarly, the letters on the fifth row lit up in close succession. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 of them lit up. 5 stars of the spiritual pedestal tier. However, compared with Ao Yuanwei, one had to prepare for 3 breaths before he could strike out a blow worth 5 battle stars of spiritual pedestal tier, whereas a casual strike from the other possessed such might. There was an extremely obvious gap between the two of them. Ao Yuanwei could not help his expression darkening, and none of the other 5 Ao sons looked any better either. The gap between them and Ao Xinglai was increasing further and further. Please come here to fill in your information, one of the people in charge of registration said with a smile. Although the other 5 sons of the Ao clan were all participants of the last tournament, they did not manage to enter the ranks. Thus, they would be considered new entries every year. The 5 Ao sons advanced to fill their information. There would be another test of age later on, whereas Ao Xinglai and Ao Yuanwei were invited into the resting room. Everyone else continued to stand in the queue. Isn't that Yukuan? A commotion arose among the crowd. All turned in its direction, whereupon they saw a slender, tall young man's figure appear. He exuded a powerful aura that was absolutely incredible. But there was another slender, shapely, extremely gorgeous beauty beside him who was actually not suppressed by Yukuan-Luan's overwhelming aura at all. Not only did her standing by his side not result in her paling in color. Instead, the comparison made her even more shiningly brilliant. Who is that girl? So beautiful, my soul is about to leave my body just from the sight of her. She's not inferior to Fairy Zhu at all, is she? Hey, that's because you've never seen Fairy Zhu. If anyone who has ever seen Fairy Zhu sees any other woman after that, they would think that she was as ugly as a pig. Hey, hey, hey. Is Fairy Zhu really that beautiful? When she heard the spectators' discussion, Hua Han had at first been rather pleased with herself, but the more she heard, the more her beautiful face froze over. For a beauty, the thing that she most hated was hearing that her beauty was inferior to someone else. What more when she was being looked down upon by others as if she were nothing. Zhu Xuan'er, during the prodigy tournament, I will disfigure your beautiful face. Let's see how you will be beautiful then, she thought venomously. Yukuan-Luan advanced with big strides. His cultivation level at the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier was considered invincible among the current younger generation. Merely his aura was enough to cause one to collapse. As long as he had yet to break through to the flower blossom tier, he was still mortal. Reaching that step was really much too difficult. Perhaps, 10 years or even 20 years later, he would still be at the same level he was now. However, for now, Yukuan-Luan was much too powerful. As he passed, everyone could not help but lower their heads. Firstly, it was because they were suppressed by the former's aura, and secondly, it was out of respect for someone who had once been the strongest on the prodigy roll. He brought Hua Han to the area for testing, smiling, and asked, "Do you mind if I cut into the queue?" "Of course not. Of course not. How could the first place holder on the last tournament not have some special privileges?" "Junior sister, please," Yukuan-Luan said, smiling. Hua Han nodded and drew a sword from the weapons rack. She focused her attention and her almond eyes shone, obviously planning to make a powerful move. Originally, with her cultivation at the spiritual pedestal tier, a casual slash would be good enough. She would definitely be capable of entering into the actual tournament, but she had obviously received some provocation and intended to amaze all the spectators with a single feat. After a few breaths, she suddenly leaped forwards. Her sword struck out, and Hong, uncountable flashes of golden light actually flickered behind her figure, making a great number of the spectators turn away from the dazzling sight. Hong, her strike hit its target and the letters on the 5th row of the testing stone plaque immediately lit up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. 13 stars of the spiritual pedestal tier. Hiss. Everyone gasped in shock. There was a black horse again in this tournament. Someone with battle prowess at 13 stars of spiritual pedestal tier. She'd probably even be able to squeeze into the top 10, wouldn't she? Hua Yinghan smiled proudly. Truly, she was not willing to concede to Zhu Xuan'er. What greatest beauty of the northern region or greatest genius? She had come this time to pull the ladder from her high horse. Past, please come here for registration, the person in charge of registration quickly said. Yu Kuan-luan smiled and asked, do you mind if I test myself as well? No problem. Of course there's no problem. When they heard the strongest person on the prodigy roll who had just left the roll express the wish to test his battle prowess, the spectators were all excited. What kind of battle prowess would the man who had once been the strongest have? Last year, it was estimated that his battle prowess had reached 17 stars. Would he now have 18 stars, or even 19? Yu Kuan-luan very quickly struck out with a slash. The letters on the 5th row lit up consecutively, and finally, 18 had lit up. 18 stars of the spiritual pedestal tier. This was the strongest battle prowess that had appeared so far. All of the crowd exclaimed in surprise. A gap of a single star of battle prowess was enough to decide the battle, so how awesome was this battle prowess of 18 battle stars? No wonder he was the strongest on the last tournament's prodigy roll. He was powerful. This was the result that Yu Kuan-luan was aiming for. Though he had left the roll, he still could not let go of that kind of glory, and no matter what, wanted to show his presence. After a bout of noise and commotion, the testing continued. This time, there did not appear any more monsters. The majority were mercilessly disqualified after testing. After all, only the top 200 in battle prowess would qualify for the actual tournament. Finally, it was the turn of Gu Fenghua and the others. They all stepped forwards to be tested, and the result was good. At least they had all stayed in the top 200. The most pitiful was Gu Fenghua. After 3 rounds of testing, the results of the first 2 times were not good enough for him to enter into the top 200, and it was only the last time when he exploded. However, he was later forced out of the ranks by someone else's results. There were only 200 places, and at least 50 or 60 would still be disqualified in the end. During the testing, one could strike a total of 3 times. The best result would be taken into account to avoid the situation in which one was overcome with nerves, leading to a below-standard performance. I'll go first, Zhu Wujiao said and strode to stand in front of the testing stone plaque. He drew out a long sword, and used the 4 seasons sword technique. When his sword technique circulated to its maximum, he struck forth with a slash. Ji. Bright sparks flickered upon the stone plaque, and the letters on the 4th row gradually lit up. 15 stars of the spiritual ocean tier. Pass. Come here for registration. Zhu Wujiao instantly looked happily surprised. Who would have thought that 1 year ago, he was still an unremarkable disciple of Huyang Academy, yet now he was actually able to appear on the stage of the Prodigy Tournament of the North region. Furthermore, he only needed to win once and he would be able to qualify as a genius on the Prodigy roll. All this was because of that man. Everything was brought to him by that young man who was even a few years younger than himself. Zhu Wujiao could not help but glance back at Ling Han. He somberly bowed in his direction, his heart filled with gratitude. He internally swore that he would use his whole lifetime to repay Ling Han. Hiss, a cold sweat appeared on Diao Wenda's body. He was also on the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier, but his battle prowess was only 14 stars. Qin Yi was second. What, even a handicap came? This is the prodigy roll, not the handicap roll. Ha 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 ha. Some unkind spectators immediately erupted in loud laughter, but Qin Yi was not the slightest bit angry. He merely drew a long saber, and Shui struck out with a slash. Wang, 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 the letters on the fourth row of the testing stone plaque instantly lit up. 15 stars of the spiritual ocean tier. His result was the same as Zhu Wujiu, but this wasn't taking into account the fact that the heavenly luck stone in his body had yet to take effect. Thus, if he was even one minor cultivation layer higher than Zhu Wujiu, his talent was still much, much better than Zhu Wujiu. Pass. Qin Yi similarly bowed to Ling Han before heading over to fill in his information. The people who had mocked Qin Yi previously were immediately silenced, their expressions looking horrible. Those who could enter into the actual tournament were all incredible people who could definitely break through to the flower blossom tier as long as they took one more step further. Was it really a good thing to offend a flower blossom tier cultivator? There was a number of those already planning to apologize to Qin Yi later on. How could they allow someone who might break through to the flower blossom tier in the future to bear a grudge against them? And Diao Wende's face was beginning to turn green. Chapter 435, Hunyou's Battle Prowess. Dark Angel _ In this place, an outstanding performance would attract applause, cheers, and the favor of beautiful women. Once Qin Yi and Zhu Wujiu qualified, various beauties immediately cast seductive glances at them. Even well-bred young ladies from prestigious families like Jiang Luxian and Di Yin were no exception, though they were much more restrained in their interest. Those on the prodigy roll would definitely break through to the flower blossom tier, who did not want to marry this kind of hero, and what party did not want to attract this kind of future elite cultivator? The flower blossom tier, in the north region, that was the absolute pinnacle of strength. I'm going now, Lu Yutong said to Ling Han. Ling Han nodded. Today was only the registration. As a result, neither Guang Yuan nor Li Si-chan had come. However, when the actual tournament formally began tomorrow, they would both naturally come to cheer and support the others. The moment Lu Yutong appeared, dressed completely in white and as beautiful as a deity, she instantly entranced all those around her. There was no shortage of beautiful women, but there were not many beauties who were also talented in martial arts. Every single one of them was a limited, rare resource. It was also why Hua Han had caused such a great commotion previously. Lu Yutong also used the Four Seasons sword technique, and at the point when it circulated to the strongest move in its arsenal, she struck a slash at the testing stone plaque. 20 stars of the spiritual ocean tier. Instantly, shocked exclamations arose from all around. Before her, there only appeared one other monster that had 20 stars of the spiritual ocean tier, but now here was a second one. That kind of battle prowess exceeded 11 stars, which was really much too astonishing. Furthermore, this girl was so beautiful as well. A considerable number of elite cultivators that were already on the roll were also watching from the crowd, and they could not stop their eyes from lighting up. If they managed to marry such a girl, that would really be a wonderful match. For geniuses like them, they were destined to be able to break through to the flower blossom tier and possess a lifespan of about 300 years. If there was no one capable of accompanying them for these 300 years, how regretful would that be? But if they had a similarly powerful partner, that was a different story. They would be able to share life and death together, right until the end of their long lifetimes. Thus, beauties such as Lu Yutong, Hua Han, and Lin Xiangqin were the center of much admiration, far surpassing beauties such as Jiang Luxian and the others even if they were all more or less equally beautiful. Lu Yutong bowed to Ling Han, then went off to fill in her information. This caused another bout of surprised exclamations to arise among the spectators. Why had those three all made their salutations to Ling Han? Who was this guy? One had to know that all three of them were qualified to be ranked on the roll. Diao Wende's face twitched uncontrollably. If it wasn't for the fact that he had yet to register, he'd really want to hide his face and flee. Niu's turn. Hunyou leaped off Ling Han, and ran out. Pooh! At least half of the people around them laughed out loud. What joke was going on here? Even a 5, or 6-year-old little girl was joining in on the excitement. Because there was only one day reserved for registration, the Spirit Treasures Pavilion set a minimum condition for participants: they had to at least reach the Spiritual Ocean tier. If you're not in the Spiritual Ocean tier yet, what are you here for? But for a 5 or 6-year-old little girl, let alone the Spiritual Ocean tier, she most likely hadn't even awoken her spirit base, so wasn't this funny? Little girl, this is not the place for you to play. Hurry up and go back, one of the men in charge of registration said with a smile. He was being so nice and cordial for Ling Han's sake. After all, there were 3 consecutive cultivators who had a high chance of getting on the roll that bowed and paid salutations to Ling Han. Hu Niu was extremely displeased. She put her hands on her hips, then demanded, "Why not let Niu play? This is really not the place for you to play." That man was in a cold sweat. This kind of a little girl was really the type to pester endlessly, and would not be convinced by mere words. All around them, everyone kept laughing without stop. Hu Niu looked very dainty and delicate, and this kind of little girl was very pleasing to their eyes. Furthermore, the childishness that she displayed was so fun as well, making them all extremely amused. Don't laugh. Hu Niu was displeased. She was not here to play around, okay? Pung. She struck out with a punch at the testing stone plaque. Wang, wang, wang. The letters on the 4th row immediately lit up. 20 stars. Instantly, a powerful silence fell. Fuck, battle prowess of 20 stars of the Spiritual Ocean tier on a 5 or 6-year-old little girl? All of them had their hands on their faces to avoid their jaws from falling out of tremendous shock. Was this possible? 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 Niu, you can try another 2 times, Ling Han said, smiling. He was naturally not astonished by Hu Niu's display. Hee hee. Hu Niu laughed, and her fist became a clawed hand, which she then struck at the testing stone plaque. Wang. This time, the letters on the 4th row did not light up, but the letters on the 5th row did. 1 and 2. Merely 2 letters lit up. Pooh. 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 But all around them, the spectators were all gaping with their tongues out. What did the lighting up of letters on the 5th row mean? Battle prowess of the Spiritual Pedestal tier? Such a casual claw from the little girl actually had the power of 2 stars of the Spiritual Pedestal tier? My gods, where had this monster come from? P-Pass, please come here to fill in your information, the person in charge of registration said in a trembling voice. There was a total of 8 people doing the registration, but he was the only one who could still speak consciously now, whereas the other 7 had frozen into statues. Yet Hu Niu had not had enough. Her punch and claw actually didn't manage to shatter the stone plaque. Hu Niu was very angry, and the consequences were very serious. Bite. She pounced over, opened her little mouth, bared her snow-white teeth at the stone plaque, and took a large bite. Damn! When they saw that, all those who were still stuck in a state of shock did not know what expression they should have. Such a little girl with such logic-defying battle prowess was really playing around too much? You actually used your mouth to bite the damn stone. If you battle with a foe in future, could it be that you plan to bite him like this too? Wang, following Hu Niu's bite, the letters on the 5th row lit up one by one. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. In an instant, all 20 letters had lit up, and simultaneously darkened. The letters on the 6th row were beginning to light up. My gods! At this moment, everyone had the feeling as if they had seen a pig flying through the skies. This world must have collapsed. How could there possibly happen such a crazy, outrageous thing? My eyes must have blurred, they thought. But the letters on the 6th row were still endlessly lighting up. 5, 10, 15. The whole area was in complete silence that the drop of a needle could be heard. Everyone's eyes were about to pop out of their heads as they looked at the stone plaque and Hu Niu, who was still bent over it in a very funny pose. However, not one person laughed. 18, 19, 20. Finally, there was no more change on the testing stone plaque. It had stopped at the point where all the letters on the 6th row had lit up. The flower blossom tier, 20 stars. Everyone's mouths twitched uncontrollably. If they were bitten by this little girl, then even the defense of the flower blossom tier would be rendered useless. Though the greatest destructive power did not represent actual battle prowess, as you might not be able to bite your opponent. But in case she really did, then even flower blossom tier elites would cry. Monster. That was no longer a freak, but a real monster. Yu Kuan Luan. Ao Xing Lai. Zhu Xuan'er. Hua Ying Han. Whether they were elite cultivators on the roll, or potentially going to be ranked on the roll, they were all rendered completely speechless at this moment in time. As for the few old monsters that were standing by, they, too, felt their facial muscles twitch uncontrollably, feeling a faint feeling of frustration. Hunyo's destructive power made even them wary. Only Ling Han was laughing internally. Hunyo's little mouth was capable of even biting through the power barrier that a ruler demonic beast in the 9th layer of the flower blossom tier had set up. What powerful teeth did she have then? Yay! Hunyo turned around, and flashed a pretty smile at Ling Han. Chapter 436, Ling Han's Battle Prowess. Dark Angel _ Please come here to fill in your information, the person in charge of registration said in a shaking voice. He couldn't even speak clearly anymore, and kept biting his tongue as he spoke. Hunyo shook her head, and replied, "No, wait for Ling Han." The staff personnel turned and looked questioningly at Ling Han. Ling Han stepped out, smiled and said, "Then I'll give it a try." So many of them had already had their turn, and he also wanted to see how many stars of spiritual pedestal tier of battle prowess he had. Ling Han drew a long sword and gave it a casual wave. 7 golden rods were laid out immediately. Wang, a white snake appeared out of thin air before quickly surging into his body. Array Master. This prodigy tournament would definitely be even more monstrous than the last one. All these monsters have come out. That's right. The last tournament has been known as the most glorious one in history, in which over 20 extremely powerful rookies appeared. Though there did not appear so many in this one, but in terms of quality, in terms of monstrosity, this tournament has far surpassed the last one. The spectators have all come back to themselves slightly. At first, there appeared a little girl whose bite had the power of 20 stars of the flower blossom tier, followed by the appearance of an array master. Really, this was becoming the land of monsters. What, Ling Han is actually an array master as well. After Gu Fenghua and the others had finished the test for their age, they raced back to see how Ling Han and his group were doing, and in the end, this was the scene they witnessed. Martial arts, alchemy, array arts, an expert in all arts. Does such a perfect person actually exist in this world? Lin Xiangqin, meanwhile, was love-struck. With her hands pressing down on her breast, she declared, "This man, I am definitely going to make him mine." Ling Han faced the testing stone plaque. Preparation for the mysterious 3000 was complete, and strike. Shio, shio, shio. 9 flashes of sword chi surged forth, and together with the blade itself, they all together gave rise to 1,000 sword flashes in an earth-shattering display that slashed towards the testing stone plaque. The letters on the 5th row immediately lit up. Instantly, there were 8, before gradually lighting up, and merely stopped when 11 letters had lit up. 11 stars of the spiritual pedestal tier of battle prowess. Hiss, everyone began to hiss in shock. That was because Ling Han was only in the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier. There had never been anyone in the 9th layer of spiritual ocean tier that could manage to deliver an attack worth 11 stars of the spiritual pedestal tier. How many stars had that surpassed? Although they saw Hunyo's bite had the power of 20 stars of the flower blossom tier, but biting could still not be considered as an actual battle technique, could it? Yet Ling Han shook his head. In terms of destructive power, 10,000 techniques returned to one far surpassed mysterious 3,000. That technique was equivalent to fusing 10,000 sword flashes into a single flash, and its destructive power was 100-fold, or perhaps even 1,000-fold stronger. Because if one punch had 10 pounds of power behind it, then even 1,000 punches would not kill a man. But what if one could actually deliver 10,000 pounds of power in a single punch? Unfortunately, he had not yet managed to form Sword Ray, and was not able to use 10,000 techniques returned to one yet. Even if he used it forcibly now, he would only be able to deliver a strike that was fused from 10+ slashes of his sword, and that was still inferior to mysterious 3,000. Pass, the staff member was stuttering again. Ling Han thought for a while, then said, "Let me try again." He abandoned the sword and withdrew the little Tianyuan spirit snake array. He walked to stand in front of the stone plaque and pressed his left hand down on it. Nobody saw when a variety of black-colored demonic patterns lit up on his palm. This had come from refining the demonic chi and originated from the Azura demon emperor, who was an elite from the realm of gods. Ling Han merely knew that the demonic patterns possessed tremendous destructive power, but exactly how powerful it was, he did not have a clear idea. This would be a good chance for him to give it a test. He pressed down. Wang, the letters on the 7th row immediately lit up. 10, 15, 20. And no more after that. This testing stone plaque only had a total of 7 rows of letters, and the last 3 rows were already degraded. After all, it has been millennia, or even tens of millennia of time, so it was not complete anymore. What kind of concept was the 7th row? Battle prowess of the spiritual infant tier. 20 stars of the spiritual infant tier. Air. Everyone was once again frozen into stone. One could deliver a bite worth 20 stars of flower blossoming tier, which was already shocking enough to make one's hair stand on end and feet grow cold. Yet a casual press of the hand from Ling Han was worth 20 stars of the spiritual ocean tier. What was going on here? Had something gone wrong with the testing stone plaque? Ling Han withdrew his hand and could not help but shake his head, feeling slightly regretful. He still had not managed to test out the true destructive power of the demonic patterns. True, this belongs to an elite from the realm of the gods. It might be the most powerful killing move on this plane. When he faced Azura Demon Emperor in future, he must definitely not allow the latter to clap a hand on him, or the results would be terrible. However, this should not have surpassed the limitation of a level 10 spirit tool, because the demon birth sword was obviously capable of resisting the might of the demonic pattern. Its limit might perhaps be heaven tier or deity transformation tier. Or so Ling Han thought. Sir, please come here to our register. That staff member was completely weak. Oh. Ling Han smiled, and said, I just used a spirit tool just now, so it cannot be counted. Moreover, I have no plans to take part in the prodigy tournament. I'm only here to accompany this little girl to prevent her from causing trouble. So that was the might of a spirit tool. All of them exhaled in relief. Whether that was true or not, they were willing to believe that it was the truth. Otherwise, if a young man in the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier had the battle prowess of 20 stars of spiritual infant tier, who would be able to accept that reality? Still, if you're not participating, why did you come here to give everyone a scare? Some of them suddenly recalled that though the battle prowess of 20 stars of the spiritual infant tier was definitely not completely true, Ling Han's previous strike did have the battle prowess of 11 stars of the spiritual pedestal tier. In case of one with cultivation at the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier, that kind of talent was practically logic-defying. Once he broke through to the spiritual pedestal tier, what other cultivator of the spiritual pedestal tier could be on par with him? Even Yu Kuan-Luan would have to admit defeat, right? When he heard the quiet murmurs of those around him, Yu Kuan-Luan's expression looked a little ugly. As for Diao Wende, he was already shivering, and had completely lost all power of speech. All he wanted to do now was to dig a hole to bury himself in. Ling Han walked over and picked Hu Niu up before filling in the information for the little girl. Name, Hu Niu, age, estimated 6 years old, birthplace, not really sure. Looking at that kind of information, the faces of the staff twitched uncontrollably. Were you picked up from somewhere? Why is that your name, age, and birthplace is all so weird? Niu was picked up, Ling Han picked up. Niu giggled, lying in Ling Han's arms, absolutely carefree. She was picked up and she was still so happy. They really admired her for her carefree nature. However, everyone looked at Ling Han in envy. They, too, wanted to pick up a little monster like her and raise her. Afterwards was naturally the test of age, to prevent the situation whereupon someone would deliberately use disguise techniques to make themselves look young. The fairness of this tournament had to be ensured. Niu naturally passed the test of age successfully. Actually, with her appearance, there was absolutely no need to test her age. No matter how one disguised themselves, there was absolutely no way they could disguise themselves to look like her, right? And now, when this day was over, the strongest 144 people would, together with the remaining elite cultivators on the prodigy roll, form a total of 200 people before proceeding with a series of knockout battles. For rookies, they were only a mere step away from victory. As long as they won the next day, they would successfully enter into the ranks of the prodigy roll, and could at least stay on the roll for 3 years. And there was another significance to entering into the prodigy roll, and that was the fact that there has never been anyone who was ranked on the prodigy roll that did not manage to break through to the flower blossom tier. Chapter 437, Knockout Battles. Dark Angel _ Breaking through to the flower blossom tier meant one would surpass one's mortal limitations. This was the dream of every martial artist, but how many would actually achieve the feat of breaking through to the flower blossom tier in this world? At night, Gu Fenghua, Qi Hualan, Lin Xiangqin and the others all came over. They had all successfully advanced into the actual tournament, which was naturally something to be happy about. They would of course have a nice celebration in honor of it, and when they came to the topic of Ling Han and Niu's daytime performance, they all inhaled sharply. Too powerful. If I fight with Niu in future, I definitely cannot allow her to bite me. Gu Fenghua declared with much distress. N. All of them nodded their agreement. The ferocity and violence of the little girl was enrooted deep in their hearts. Niu doesn't want to bite you all, smelly. Niu was eating with much fervor, yet the fact that she could still speak clearly could not help but impress all of them. Grandmaster Ling, when did you become an array master? Lin Xiangqin gazed at Ling Han seductively, which made Lu Yutong and Li Sichan feel an uncontrollable despise for her. That's right. Are you planning to let anyone live? You're already an alchemist, you have a terrifyingly high talent in martial arts, and now you're an array master too. Gu Fenghua shared the same feelings and sighed. Compared with you, I'm close to losing my name as the biggest pervert. Fine, I have absolutely zero interest in snatching this name from you, so please rest assured. Ling Han laughed. All of them were feasting on dishes made from the ingredients grown in the Black Tower, wolfing the food down voraciously. Even Qi Hualan and Lin Xiangqin, two beauties that have been praised as deities, were no exception. They were fighting over the food extraordinarily fiercely, making everyone dumbstruck. After a good night's rest, the knockout battles finally began. They all drew lots, and adhering to the principle that no one that is already on the roll should encounter each other, formed 100 battle pairs. And these 100 pairs were further divided into 10 batches, with every battle having a time limit of an hour. If the victor was still undecided at the end of that hour, there would be an additional battle conducted after the battles for all 10 batches were finished. This was a knockout battle, so there was naturally no such thing as a tie. Ling Han, Li Sichan, and Guang Yuan were all seated on the spectator stands, which they had paid the entrance fee of 1 origin crystal for. This was really very expensive. Even an elite cultivator of the spiritual ocean tier would have to spend a whole month to successfully refine one. Even so, there was no empty seat in this great arena. Merely from the entrance fees alone, the Spirit Treasures Pavilion would be able to earn about 200,000 origin crystals. This ability of earning money was really enough to make one exclaim in shock. Who allowed that this prodigy role was organized by them? And it was also the neutrality and the powerful background of the Spirit Treasures Pavilion that ensured that the results of the tournament would be universally recognized by all martial artists. Otherwise, no matter which sect organized it, it would be inevitable that there would be doubts whether the tournament was more partial towards their own disciples. Lu Yutong, Qin Yi, and Zhu Wujiu all drew good lots and successfully avoided those on the prodigy roll. They also managed to dodge the few recognized powerful characters among the rookies. Hun Yo, on the other hand, drew Ao Xinglai as her opponent. He was originally 78th on the prodigy roll, and now had also broken through to the spiritual pedestal tier. His battle prowess was at least 5 stars. Ordinarily, if a rookie was matched with an elite cultivator on the roll, they would definitely sigh at their own misfortune. The latter managed to be ranked on the roll 3 years ago, and now that 3 years had passed, his skill would have definitely improved much. But now, everyone was filled with sympathy for Ao Xinglai. Looks like this character from the last tournament's roll would continue to wear the label of the last roll. Who did not know about Hun Yo's monstrosity now? One punch from her had 20 stars of the spiritual ocean tier, a claw had the might of 2 stars of the spiritual pedestal tier, and a single bite was strong enough to reach the level of 20 stars of the flower blossom tier. She was an absolute little monster. Ao Xinglai was indeed very strong, and also the strongest of the 7 sons of the Ao clan, but now, no one was very optimistic about him. His and Hun Yo's battle was in the 7th batch and would only begin in the afternoon, but Ao Xinglai's expression did not look very pleasant. It was not that there was no previous example when an elite cultivator on the roll was defeated by a rookie, but it was a very, very rare case. If this kind of thing happened to him, that would really be too humiliating. Please choose your weapon, the host announced. The battles for the first batch immediately began. After the 20 competitors chose their respective weapons, they began to fight at the signal. Qin Yi was in the first batch, his opponent was a skilled wielder of the spear. The latter was similarly in the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier and his tested battle prowess was 15 stars, which was at the same level as Qin Yi. But the test for battle prowess was only a display of the strongest destructive puer, and not actual battle prowess. The actual ability of a martial artist still needed to be shown through an actual battle. The two immediately engaged in a fierce battle. Qin Yi was absolutely merciless. 7 flashes of saber chi danced forth, one ferocious slash after another, and repeatedly attacked forcefully. In a single go, he shot out 81 slashes, and his opponent had not even managed to hold up his spear properly to parry when the area between his thumb and forefinger was ripped. He was left with no choice but to admit defeat. Ling Han nodded. Qin Yi had also found his own path of martial arts and possessed his own powerful style, which was to advance bravely, and would rather be broken than veer off his path. It was either his saber would slash his foes apart, or he would shatter himself, there was no third possibility. It could be called the dominating saber. An hour later, the battles for the first batch were all finished, and there were no unexpected results. All the elite cultivators on the roll emerged victorious. The second round began, and there were a considerable number of well-known challengers in this batch. Lu Yang, 9th on the prodigy roll, and also the one with the highest ranking on the roll presently. The top 8 were naturally disqualified due to their age. Chu Xiuzhu, whose battle prowess reached as high as 20 stars of spiritual ocean tier. Hua Yinghan, Yu Kuanluan's junior sister disciple, a new entry into the spiritual pedestal tier. Ling Han was primarily focused on Lu Yang. He was an excellent disciple of the Beast Emperor sect and had a pet beast, a frost-clouded leopard. Due to the special nature of this sect, he was allowed to battle with his pet beast. He was similar to the Thousand Corpse sect without the pet, his battle prowess would at least drop drastically by about 90%. However, Lu Yang's opponent was really too weak. He was only in the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier, and because Lu Yang managed to win with a casual strike, he did not make use of his pet at all. Sixth layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, Ling Han said quietly. This was possibly the highest cultivation level in this prodigy tournament. Chu Xiaozhu and Hua Yinghan successfully advanced too, and were ranked as new members on the prodigy roll. The battles continued. Finally, an unexpected result emerged. Lo De, ranked 42 on the prodigy roll, actually lost to a mysterious character. That person only revealed the battle prowess of a star of spiritual pedestal tier during the test, yet easily defeated Lo De. He concealed his ability. Indeed, that person is in the spiritual pedestal tier in the first place, and as long as he displayed the battle prowess of a single battle star, it would be enough for him to make it to the actual tournament. He struck so calmly just now, so that obviously is not his true ability, either. This could be another dark horse that can charge into the top 10. This person's name was Yang Junhao, and there was pitifully little information on him. It was only known that he is 23 years old, the test of age also confirmed that. But when Ling Han's eyes swept over him, he was astonished because this guy was shockingly in the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier. In the North region, with that kind of young age to stand at such a high cultivation level, he could be claimed a genius among geniuses. The 3rd and 4th batch finished, and in the 5th batch, Zhu Wujiao appeared. After a hard battle for an hour, he finally defeated his opponent and became another member of the prodigy roll. This meant that he had close to 100% chance of breaking through to the flower blossom tier in the future, which made him extremely overjoyed. If he ever returned to Rain County, that would be the undeniably strongest level of battle prowess. In the 6th round, Ling Han saw Yu Kaiyu, his cousin. After this guy obtained the return spirit pill, he strengthened his foundations and had already broken through to the spiritual pedestal tier, possessing exceptional battle prowess. He very easily defeated an elite cultivator from the prodigy roll. This was the 4th case of a rookie defeating a senior member of the prodigy roll in battle. Chapter 438, End of the Ranking Battles. Dark Angel _ In the 7th batch, the most attention-grabbing battle was of course the one between Hunyao and Ao Xing Lai. They had all witnessed the illogical destructive power that Hunyao possessed. No matter how strong an elite of the flower blossom tier was, they would be unable to stand against her teeth. However, destructive power was destructive power, and did not represent one's battle prowess. They all wanted to see Hunyao really fight. She would undoubtedly become everyone's strong rival. Thankfully, the other monster, Ling Han, did not participate in the tournament. Otherwise, everyone would have another person to be wary of. Ao Xing Lai was very, very displeased. How had he managed to draw a freak like Hunyao as his opponent? But it had already happened, and an elite cultivator like him would naturally not cower. To make the impossible happen, that was the character of a real powerful cultivator. He raised his sword to a level position, his expression serious. His opponent was only a little girl, so he was naturally not going to spout any lines that fitted the situation. No matter how fantastic his speech was, it would only make the spectators break out into laughter. Nyo's super skill, invincible wind and fire wheels. Hunyao rushed forth, her arms moving rapidly in circular motions, looking as if they were two wheels that headed in Ao Xing Lai's direction. Ao Xing Lai was unafraid. He was at the complete advantage in terms of cultivation level, which also meant that he was at advantage in terms of power. This was the unbreakable reality of martial arts. His sword stabbed forth as 7 flashes of sword chi surged, attacking Hunyao from 7 separate directions. He similarly had confidence in his attack power. As long as one of his attacks hit her, Hunyao was definitely going to be defeated. With a powerful flower blossom tier cultivator on standby, it was not possible for fatalities to happen here. Hunyao used her high-speed motion technique, and with a flash, appeared behind Ao Xing Lai. Peng, 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 the invincible wind and fire wheels suddenly crashed onto his back. Peng, 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 one punch followed another. The power of her fist measured up to 20 stars of the spiritual ocean tier of destructive power, and because Ao Xinglai had not foreseen that she could move so quickly, he had used the majority of his power in his initial stab, so the defenses on his back were unimaginably weak. Instantly, the impact of the attack made him stumble a few steps ahead, as he continued to endlessly throw up blood. No way. All the spectators were dumbstruck by the scene they had witnessed. How could there be someone possessing such rapid speed? Such absolute speed plus a terrifying destructive power was the perfect combination. To deal with this kind of attack, one could only use an area attack that had absolutely no weaknesses at any angle to prevent Hunyao from coming closer, or counter with an absolute killing strike when she was close enough. Ao Xinglai roared in fury and hurriedly used origin power to protect his back. Peng, 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 peng. His martial intent was activated and formed multiple brilliant patterns, and he finally managed to steady himself. 20 stars of spiritual ocean of destructive power was still merely the spiritual ocean level after all. It could not possibly cause too much damage to his spiritual pedestal tier level defenses. He turned around, intending to face Hunyao, but how could he possibly be on par with Hunyao's speed? He turned and Hunyao turned with him as if she was his shadow, sticking closely to his back. Peng, 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 peng. Ao Xinglai could only be thrashed. He had the mighty power of a spiritual pedestal tier cultivator, but could not use any of his power at all. Nyo's Heaven Wolf Claws. When Hunyao saw that her punches were ineffective, she switched to using claw attacks. This time, even Ao Xinglai's defenses were unable to stand up to her powerful attacks, and streams of blood sprayed from his back. Enough, the referee declared, calling a halt to the battle. This battle had exceeded everyone's expectations, but was within logic. Why had it been unexpected? Because the battle was so one-sided. No matter what, Ao Xinglai had still been number 78th in the last tournament roll, yet he practically was completely unable to fight back at all. However, Hunyao was one that showed destructive power as high as 20 stars of the flower blossom tier, so it seemed as if the result of this battle was logical. In the 8th batch, Lu Yutong, too, successfully won her battle. Until now, all 4 people from Ling Han's party managed to successfully get a rank on the prodigy roll. This was definitely a miracle because even such great parties like the Beast Emperor's sect and the Winter Moon sect would definitely have no more than 2 or 3 disciples that could enter the prodigy roll at the same time. What was left now was to see how far these 4 could advance. Lu Yutong, Ken Yi, and Zhu Wujiao most probably could only reach a rank beneath the top 50, but as long as Hunyao performed like usual, she definitely had the ability to make a bid for the first place. The battles of the first day had ended, and all the new members of the prodigy roll were out. Furthermore, out of the 56 people left behind on the roll, as many as 7 people had been defeated and lost their place on the roll, which meant that more than half of the people on the roll were new faces. This was something that had rarely happened in the history of the prodigy roll. On the second day, the ranking battles began. Though Ling Han also went to watch, he did not care about it too much. This was only an empty name, and what was really important was to increase one's power. The battles were very intensive. Every person would have to fight in 10 battles every day, which would continue for 10 days. The result of each battle would affect the final ranking, so if one wanted to get a good rank on the roll, every single battle was extremely important. Lu Yutong, Zhu Wujiao and Ken Yi were limited by their cultivation level after all, so they were definitely going to lose against an opponent in the spiritual pedestal tier, but they were more likely to win than lose against spiritual ocean tier opponents. Only Hunyao advanced fiercely ahead, but when she encountered Zhu Wujiao on the first day, she took the initiative to forfeit and gave the latter a win. On the 5th day, when she encountered Ken Yi, she similarly threw the battle, and on the 7th day, when she was matched against Lu Yutong, she did not. These were the only 2 battles she had lost. And on the rankings, the mysterious person, Yang Junhao, displayed absolute power, suppressing senior opponents from the prodigy roll such as Lu Yang, Zhu Xuan'er, and Zui Yuda, and also crushed new stars like Hua Yinghan and Shuren Ping. At the moment, he had 98 wins and 0 losses, standing at the highest position of the first place. Lu Yang, Zhu Xuan'er and the others were ranked after him as they all had 96 wins and 2 losses. They lost once against Yang Junhao, and the second loss was against Hunyou. Obviously, Yang Junhao had attained the first place on the prodigy roll ahead of time. The last match was the much-expected battle between Yang Junhao and Hunyou. Unfortunately, the results of this battle would have no effect on the current rankings. After the battle began, Hunyou still managed to get the upper hand due to her superior speed, yet her claw attacks were unable to break through Yang Junhao's defenses. Furthermore, she did not want to bite him either, disdaining him for being too dirty. Thus, she was not able to win in the end, and the final result of the battle was a tie. As a result, Yang Junhao, with the superior result of 98 wins and 1 tie, obtained the first place in this prodigy tournament. The second was Lu Yang 97 wins, the third was Hunyou 96 wins and 1 tie, the fourth was Zhu Xuan'er 96 wins. From the 5th place until the 10th, they were Hua Han, Zui Yuda, Shi Ping, Shenzhong Cheng, Shui Cheng, and Ji De Rong, respectively. Qin Yi was 42nd and Lu Yutong was 52nd, whereas Zhu Weijiu was 79th. Aside from them, Yu Kaiyu's rank was very high. He managed to charge all the way to the 22nd place. With the return spirit pill to strengthen his foundations, he had indeed improved fiercely. However, everyone felt that it was very unfair for Hunyou to be ranked 3rd. She had defeated the person in the 2nd place. Moreover, in the battle against Yang Junhao, Hunyou had not tried her best, because she had not used her bite, which was her most powerful attack. Otherwise, it was guaranteed that even Yang Junhao would be for co-ed to his knees. But it was all right. After a year, the rankings on the prodigy roll would not be ranked this way, but rather would be ranked according to the actual battle results of the 100 people on the prodigy roll. It would take into account their spirit tools, luck, alchemical pills, and other variables. Moreover, how old was Hunyou? She was currently only 6 years old and could still occupy the prodigy role for a whole 24 years. In the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier, she was already so powerful, so when she entered the spiritual pedestal tier, who would be able to stand against her? When the battles for the prodigy tournament ended, another big piece of news suddenly arrived. The 12 heaven mystery realms were about to open, and the 100 people on the prodigy roll automatically gained the right to enter. Fuck. When Ling Han heard this piece of news, he immediately cursed. Chapter 439, Big News. Dark Angel _ The 12 heaven mystery realms opened every 100 years, but this period of 100 years was only an estimate. Sometimes it would be 90+ years, while at others, it could be 100+ years. There was no specific date. These were the mystery realms that belonged to the North region. There were uncountable previous cases when cultivators obtained great rewards from within which helped them to accomplish great ventures. It was rumored that the current 4 most powerful great sects had gained humongous rewards in the 12 heaven mystery realms, which allowed them to stand out and claim great success out of a multitude of other sects and ascend to become the 4 most powerful sections. Exactly what kind of rewards they had gained within, of course, the 4 great parties were not willing to divulge. This was, after all, their biggest secret. Unlike the Devil Sky Mystery Realm, wherein individuals could enter, there were very strict entry restrictions for the 12 heaven mystery realms. The first restriction was number, and the second restriction was the relative comparison of cultivation to age. It was not a firm ban on the age limit of those who could enter. For example, a 100-year-old spiritual infant tier cultivator could enter, but a 100-year-old flower blossom tier cultivator could not. A 30-year-old warrior in the deity transformation tier could enter, but a 30-year-old one in the spiritual ocean tier could not. To put it simply, only those that belonged to the young category of their respective cultivation levels could enter. This meant that they had great future potential. Exactly how many could enter into the 12 heaven mystery realms was not very clear, but the whole entry quota was held in the grasp of the various great sects of the North region. The bigger and more powerful the sect, the bigger entry quota they had, whereas weaker sects would had smaller quotas. In case of the Spirit Treasures Pavilion, they had 100 entries quota, but they were a relaxed party that was established to do business, so what was the point of having them? Thus, the Spirit Treasures Pavilion decided to simply generously offer these entry quota to the 100 people on the Prodigy roll, which could also be considered as an additional investment for the Prodigy roll. This time, the 12 Heaven Mystery Realms had opened slightly later than expected. 103 years had passed since the last time they opened. Ling Han was sullen. If he had known earlier, he should have gotten a ranking on the Prodigy roll as well. That way, he'd be able to automatically obtain the qualification to enter into the Mystery Realms. Now, however, he would have to come up with some other way. The Alchemist Society? Or the Winter Moon Sect? If he changed his appearance and returned to the Winter Moon Sect as Han Lin, the AO clan would definitely stop him, so there was not much hope for that plan. Thus, he could only take a look at the Alchemist Society and give it a try. Ling Han immediately headed to the North Pill Pavilion. He found Lu Ji Tong, but the latter told him that alchemists would focus all their energies on alchemy and their heads were completely filled with plans to improve their alchemy arts, so when would they have the time to waste inside any mystery realm? Thus, even if the Alchemist Society possessed considerable power, it did not have a single quota. So how should he get an entry then? Ling Han returned home and saw that Zhu Xuan'er was there for a visit. Apparently, a month had passed, yet because she had been occupied with the battles in the Prodigy tournament, she had not had the time to come. Now that the Prodigy tournament was over, she naturally could bear it no longer and raced over. Ling Han's eyes lit up. He said, "Get me an entry place into the 12 Heaven Mystery Realms and I'll give you a stalk of crimson red chilling ice grass." Zhu Xuan'er instantly looked troubled. She was only in the spiritual pedestal tier and did not yet have enough influence to affect her sect's decision on the name list for the entry into the 12 Heaven Mystery Realms. Moreover, entry into the 12 Heaven Mystery Realms could possibly change one's fate, so who would be willing to easily give up the opportunity? "Xuan'er will try her best," she said. Zhu Xuan'er immediately returned to the Half Moon sect. For such an important thing like the entry place into the 12 Heaven Mystery Realms, she definitely had to return to convince the higher-ups of her sect, but she did not have the slightest bit of confidence that she could succeed. If the crimson red chilling ice grass was capable of completely healing her master, then the Half Moon sect would naturally not mind using an entry place in exchange for the return of an elite spiritual infant tier cultivator. But the problem here was that the crimson red chilling ice grass was only a supplementary herb, and thinking of the few other heaven-grade spirit grasses needed, the possibility of such a feat was only wishful thinking. How could the Half Moon sect be willing to make a disinvestment like that? Ling Han did not have much hope in this method in the first place. He was waiting. Who knows, there might be some party willing to place 1 or 2 entry places on auction, then he would only need to prepare a humongous amount of origin crystals. Lu Yutong and the others were of course willing to let Ling Han have this opportunity. Anyways, with the Black Tower, Ling Han could bring others in within. The problem was, though, that their entry places could only be surrendered, and could not be handed to someone else. A few days later, another shocking piece of news spread. The Jiang clan was seeking a son-in-law. The one they were marrying off was the beloved daughter of their clan, young Mistress Jiang Luxian, a girl who was also well known as one of the 3 beauties of extreme Yang City. It was very traditionally done, as they intended to hold a tournament for her hand in marriage. This was considered something big as well. If it was merely a tournament for her hand in marriage, it was naturally not considered a big issue. However, if one managed to successfully win the hand of the beauty of the Jiang clan, he would also be able to obtain a piece of her dowry. And it was precisely this piece of her dowry that caused a stir in the whole extreme Yang City, no, the whole North region. One of the 12 mystery realms, the key to the Sagittarius Palace Hall. As long as one possessed a key to open the 12 palace halls, then there was no need for him to go through the entrance of the mystery realm. One would only have to be at a close enough distance, then use the key to directly enter the mystery realm. Thus, the Jiang clan's quest for this son-in-law was equivalent to giving out a place of entry into the mystery realm as well as a secret treasure of the Sagittarius Palace Hall. How could this piece of news not cause a commotion in the whole North region? Within the 12 heaven mystery realms, there was abundant spiritual qi. One day of cultivation within was equivalent to tens or even 100 days of cultivation outside. Furthermore, after being cut off from the rest of the world for 100 years, together with the abundant spiritual qi inside, how many spirit grasses would have grown inside? Merely these two factors were incredibly attractive. What more when the key to open the Sagittarius Palace Hall was thrown in as well? According to legends, who knows how many years ago, a lucky man managed to open the Ares Palace Hall and obtained the inheritance contained within. He ultimately became an elite heaven tier cultivator, but because the environment and conditions were too poor at the time and it was impossible for any shattering void tier ultimate cultivators to appear, he was stuck on heaven tier in the end, but only because of the two aforementioned reasons. But now, martial arts was prospering. The middle state even had several shattering void tier ultimate cultivators in their ranks. Then, if one obtained the inheritance inside the Sagittarius Palace Hall, he would definitely be able to enter the ranks of the shattering void tier. If one managed to step into the shattering void tier, there was definitely hope that he could become a god. The whole North region was stirred up. There were some that even considered the option of stealing it directly, but if one thought about it, there were now so many people who all wanted to get that key, so whoever made a move on it now was definitely going to be the target of everyone else for standing out. Everyone wanted it, so the situation now became one wherein no one dared to make a move. After all, there was still the North Pill Pavilion and the Spirit Treasures Pavilion, two such colossal establishments, on standby in Extreme Yang City, so who would dare make trouble? If you managed to steal the key, then wouldn't that make you the target of scorn and provoke all the others to gang up on you? Moreover, perhaps not even the Half Moon Sect and the Blood Flame Valley dared to get into a direct confrontation with the Alchemist Society and the Spirit Treasures Pavilion. Anyways, the Jiang clan had taken out the key as part of their daughter's dowry, so they'd all have to fight on the tournament stage. However, since it was a tournament for Jiang Luxian's hand in marriage, there were naturally restrictions in place. The Jiang clan had very clearly declared that challengers had to be at least below 40 years old. The old grandfathers need not come join in on the excitement. Wouldn't they feel embarrassed if they did? The tournament would be held for 3 days consecutively. 3 days later, at midnight, the stage master that was still standing on the tournament stage would be the ideal son-in-law of the Jiang clan. When Ling Han heard about this, his heart was naturally moved. He had been worrying about where to get an entry place in the first place, and now the chance was set in front of him, and there was even an additional key to the treasures in the Sagittarius Palace Hall in the bundle. What was the problem here, though, was that he did not have the slightest intention to marry Jiang Luxian. He had thought of having Ken Yi or Zhu Wujiao go in his place, but with their ability, AI. Hunyao was fierce enough, though, but the problem was, even if she was male, she'd be too little, wouldn't she? Chapter 440, Enter the Spiritual Pedestal Tier. Dark Angel _ The reason why the Jiang clan was willing to take out the key to the Sagittarius Palace Hall was because the Jiang clan was getting increasingly weaker as generations passed, and their power in Extreme Yang City was close to vanishing altogether. They were just barely surviving. Even if they had their clansmen bring the key into the 12 heaven mystery realms, they'd simply be swallowed whole and robbed blind by other stronger people, since they were much, much too weak. Thus, they decided to take the risk and find a most powerful son-in-law to turn the situation around with his help. Just think, the Prodigy tournament had just ended at this time, so this most powerful son-in-law had to be a member of the Prodigy role, so he'd have great potential in the first place. Added together with the inheritance inside the Sagittarius Palace Hall, it was practically guaranteed that he would break through and become an ultimate cultivator of the Shattering Void tier. And if some genius came forth and defeated all the members of the Prodigy role, that'd be even better, because it'd mean that he was even stronger. In short, though the Jiang clan had taken a dangerous step, it was also the last plan they had to turn their current circumstances around. The marriage tournament would be held 3 days later. Ling Han sighed. Though he had 4 members of the prodigy role by his side, he could use none of them, so he could only make a move personally. He began to break through to the spiritual pedestal tier. In the tournament this time, not only the male elite cultivators on the prodigy role would participate. Even those senior geniuses that had just passed out of the role were qualified. The only requirement was for the participant to be below 40 years old, and there were abundant numbers of young men that fit this category. Yu Kuan Luan, Chao Tian Yi, Bai He Shun, these first-place holders from the last prodigy role, or even the one before last, were all qualified to fight. Thankfully, the flower blossom tier was a step that was too difficult to breach. Even the geniuses on the roll would need to settle for about 20 to 30 years to accumulate enough martial arts comprehension and foundations to break through in one go. For example, Ao Feng. When he was young, he, too, had naturally ranked on the prodigy roll as well, but it was only recently that he managed to break through to the flower blossom tier. How could casting off one's mortality be so easily done? From this aspect, Yao Huiyu was indeed awesome, and the martial arts in the middle state were indeed flourishing extremely well according to rumors. Yao Huiyu was not the only powerful young cultivator in that region, and there were a few others who could equal him. As long as there were no flower blossom tier participants, once Ling Han broke through to the spiritual pedestal tier, who would be able to stand on equal footing with him at this cultivation level? Furthermore, he could even obtain another chance for the installation of power from the Black Tower, and if he really came up against an opponent in the flower blossom tier, he was still qualified to fight equally with such a character for at least a short period of time. He went into the Black Tower, entered seclusion, and began cultivating. Beside him, various alchemical pills were set out. After returning to Extreme Yang City, he had been concocting alchemical pills every day. Firstly, to earn money, and secondly, to make preparations for his breakthrough to the spiritual pedestal tier. At this stage, a spiritual pedestal that could reach the heavens would be built in the spiritual ocean, and that required the support of endless energy. Thus, it was naturally necessary for a large amount of alchemical pills as well as a large number of origin crystals to be prepared. Anyone else might need 10+ days or even a month to break through to the spiritual pedestal tier, but Ling Han only planned to spend 1 day to complete the breakthrough. He sat down and released the restrictions on his cultivation level. Instantly, raging waves appeared in his spiritual oceans. Hong long long, they shook endlessly. Ling Han had already perfected his cultivation at the spiritual ocean tier and expanded his dantian to its limits. It was the same for his spiritual oceans. The origin power they contained was extremely pure, without the slightest contamination. Under such conditions, even though he did not actively circulate it and only released the restrictions on his cultivation, the spiritual oceans actually automatically began the construction of the spiritual pedestals, which was proof of how harshly he had suppressed his cultivation. Hong, origin power condensed and 5-colored divine light flickered, forming an incredibly wide foundation, sturdily and rooted at the bottom of the spiritual ocean. Then, the second foundation level, and the third. The foundations of the spiritual pedestal were rapidly being constructed. Not 1, but 2. Both the spiritual ocean on top and at the bottom were rapidly constructing the foundations for the spiritual pedestal. Hong long long, there was a resonant sound within his body. Around him, it seemed that Lu Yutong and the others had all heard it, and all entered into a meditative state. Constructing the spiritual pedestal to connect the heaven and earth was a process in which one could interact with the heavens, and the sound of Tao would circulate within one's body, which could help other martial artists understand Tao. Thus, Ling Han had Lu Yutong and the others all wait inside the Black Tower to bask in his reflected glory. Only Hu Niu was restless. She grabbed a piece of dried meat and chewed. She was a little monster and her cultivation need only depend on the food she ate. What was comprehension? Could she eat it? Inside Ling Han's spiritual oceans, furious waves roared. They were as tall as 100 feet tall, manically crashing as if they intended to break apart the spiritual ocean. Breaking through to the spiritual pedestal tier was naturally risky, and the raging waves of the spiritual ocean were the danger of this stage. If they managed to break apart the spiritual ocean, then one's origin power would dissipate completely. Putting aside ascending to the spiritual pedestal tier, one's cultivation level might even degrade back to the gushing spring tier. But for Ling Han, this was a piece of cake. He had solidified and strengthened his cultivation level too perfectly. His spiritual oceans were sturdy and there was absolutely no need for him to fear this kind of storm. On the contrary, his spiritual pedestals were being built more and more rapidly. If anyone else in the spiritual pedestal tier was able to see the foundations of the spiritual pedestals in his mind, they would definitely dissolve into eye-popping shock. It was too huge, wasn't it? Ling Han's spiritual pedestal had practically occupied 1/3 of the space in his spiritual ocean. How large the spiritual pedestal was for others, Ling Han was not sure, but he knew that in his last life, his spiritual pedestal had only occupied 1/100th of the space of his spiritual ocean. One could clearly imagine how shockingly sturdy he had made his cultivation in this life. The foundations of the spiritual pedestal were built level by level, and rows formed the ocean's bed. After it reached a height of about 1,000 meters above the ocean's level, it finally stopped. The first layer of the spiritual pedestal tier. In the future, he would need to build a 9-level spiritual pedestal, which would mean he had reached the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal. Then, when divine flowers bloomed on the spiritual pedestal, he would have broken through to the flower blossom tier. He opened his eyes, his gaze brilliant. Within his right eye, there was a shocking scene of multiple big stars from coming into being all the way to perishing before returning to peace. The black tower trembled slightly. Ling Han's skin shone, and multiple patterns were formed on it. The body of iron sheet. Ling Han was astonished. In his cultivation of the indestructible heaven scroll, he had long surpassed the body of rock cliff, but there should still be some distance before he reached the 3rd tier, which was the body of iron sheet. He had never imagined that when he broke through to the spiritual pedestal tier, it'd actually upgrade his body's physique as well. The heavenly luck stone. Ling Han immediately thought of it. Only the heavenly luck stone could bring about this kind of effect. Previously, when he refined the heavenly luck stone, he had not obtained any benefits at all. However, the essence of nature did accumulate inside his body, and the installation of power from the Black Tower also improved the quality of his body. These benefits had completely exploded when he broke through to the next major tier. These two factors combined allowed him to ascend to the iron sheet tier in his cultivation of the indestructible heaven scroll. His current physique was as sturdy as the forging materials at the same level, which meant that he could use his body's sturdiness to stand firm against spirit tools and not be hurt. Aside from that, the maximum amount of indestructible true fluid had risen to 6 drops, which increased his ability to protect himself. Not bad, not bad. Ling Han smiled. He had been planning to change his appearance to look like Han Lin and take part in the marriage tournament. Now that his physique had reached the level of iron sheet, he needed to not worry about not having good glove form spirit tools for him to use. Instead, he could use his bare fists to parry against his opponent's spirit tools. My current battle prowess has reached how many stars? He mumbled. Before he broke through, his battle prowess was at about 11 stars of the spiritual pedestal tier, and now that he had broken through, even if it was a bit difficult for a spiritual pedestal tier cultivator to challenge a stronger foe, but there should be an addition of at least 5 battle stars, right? Furthermore, the heavenly luck stone had taken effect, so no matter what, there should be a further addition of 5 stars. 20 stars of the spiritual pedestal tier, that was the minimum. However, 20 stars was the recognized limit of the cultivation level. There was no such battle prowess like 21 stars or 22 stars. Thus, when Ling Han was in the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier, his battle prowess directly soared all the way up to 11 stars of the spiritual pedestal tier. And the flower blossom tier meant casting off one's mortal chains, and was definitely not something that a spiritual pedestal tier cultivator could compare with. This thus formed a strange phenomenon. Ling Han definitely did not have the battle prowess of the flower blossom tier, yet had exceeded the limits of spiritual pedestal tier. And this was merely his battle prowess at the first layer of the spiritual pedestal tier. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.